Tonight, we embark on a journey spanning 3,000 years, from the labyrinthine palaces of Bronze Age Crete to the moment when Rome's legions finally extinguished Greek independence. Yet this is not a story of endings, but of beginnings. For in their defeat, the Greeks achieved their greatest victory, planting seeds of thought and beauty that would bloom across millennia, shaping the very foundations of the world you know today. Friends, before we start tonight's story, I want to mention how much your support has empowered this channel's growth. Your engagement truly matters. Also, the global nature of our audience fascinates me. Where are you all listening from? And is it day or evening where you are? Feel time's current reversing, pulling you gently into the sun-drenched marble cities and wine-dark seas of ancient Greece, where the scent of olive oil and incense mingles with salt spray, and the voices of philosophers debate in the Agora, while bronze shields gleam in the Mediterranean Sunday. Picture yourself standing on a hillside, overlooking the Aegean Sea. The water stretches before you, impossibly blue, dotted with islands that fade into purple haze on the horizon. Behind you, rocky mountains rise toward a sky so clear it seems you could touch the realm of gods. This landscape, beautiful yet harsh, generous yet demanding, would forge a civilization unlike any the world had seen before. Listen closely, and you might hear the echoes still, the rhythmic chanting of priests at Knossos, calling upon the great goddess while acrobats leap over charging bulls. The clash of bronze on bronze, as Mycenaean warriors storm the walls of Troy, the solemn oaths of Spartan warriors, preparing to hold a narrow mountain pass against the assembled might of the Persian Empire. The spirited debates in Athens' assembly, where potters and aristocrats argued as equals about the fate of their city. We will walk through palaces where mysterious scripts remain unread to this day, their secrets locked away for 35 centuries. We will stand in the workshop where democracy was forged from the raw materials of tyranny and aristocratic rule. We will sit in the theatre of Dionysus as Sophocles unveils Oedipus Rex for the first time, watching an audience of thousands fall silent at the revelation of fate's cruel machinery. You will meet the people who lived these transformations, not just the famous names that echo through history, though we will encounter them too. Socrates questioning young men in the Agora, his bare feet dusty from walking Athens' streets. Alexander weeping because there were no more worlds to conquer, his God-touched ambition burning through him like fever, but also the unnamed multitudes whose daily lives built this extraordinary culture. The priestess tending sacred flames on a Minoan mountaintop, the bronze smith hammering out hoplon shields while his city prepares for war, the mother sending her son to the Agora, knowing she might never see him again, whispering the traditional Spartan farewell, "Return with your shield, or upon it." This is a story of contradictions that somehow harmonized into greatness, a society that gave birth to democracy while keeping hundreds of thousands in slavery, warriors who wrote poetry between battles, city-states so fiercely independent they would rather perish than unite, yet sharing a common identity that bound them across the wine-dark sea, philosophers who questioned everything, including the gods, yet built some of the most magnificent temples ever conceived. As our journey unfolds through the quiet hours ahead, you will discover how a collection of rocky peninsulas and scattered islands became the teacher of Rome, and through Rome, the instructor of the world. How patterns of thought first articulated in ancient Athens still structure the sentences you speak and the logic you employ. How the ideals of beauty crystallized in Periclean Athens continue to influence what your eye finds pleasing. How the Olympic spirit of competition and excellence, first kindled in 776 BC, still summons the world's athletes to compete in friendship every 4 years. So settle back now, let your breathing deepen and your thoughts grow calm. Allow the modern world with all its electric urgency to fade into background whispers. We have a long journey ahead of us, through marble cities and mountain shrines, across battlefield plains and wine-dark seas, into the hearts and minds of a people whose legacy surrounds you still, invisible as air, yet essential as breath. The story of ancient Greece awaits, ready to carry you gently toward dreams filled with wisdom, beauty, and the eternal human quest for meaning under Mediterranean stars. Act 1. The Dawn of Hellas, Bronze Age Foundations. Section 1. The Minoan Enigma. Close your eyes and imagine yourself transported to the island of Crete in 1500 BC. The Mediterranean sun warms your skin as you stand before the great palace of Knossos, its walls painted in vibrant reds and blues that seem to pulse with life. You can hear the distant sound of waves lapping against the northern shore, mixing with the chatter of merchants in the courtyard and the soft padding of bare feet on cool stone floors. This is the height of Minoan civilization, Europe's first great culture, and you are about to witness something extraordinary. Today is the day of the bull-leaping ceremony, and the palace thrums with anticipation like a great drum waiting to be struck. Let us follow a figure through these labyrinthine corridors. Her name has been lost to time, but we shall call her Ariadne, after the mythical princess who would one day help Theseus navigate these very passages. She is a priestess of the great goddess, one of the most powerful positions a woman could hold in this remarkably egalitarian society. Picture her now, wearing a flounced skirt of intricate patterns, her upper body bare according to religious custom, her long black hair elaborately styled with golden pins. Around her neck hangs a faience snake, symbol of the earth's regenerative power. Ariadne moves through the palace with practiced grace, her feet knowing every stone, every turn in these 1,000 rooms. As she walks, she passes frescoes that would astound archaeologists 3,000 years hence. Here, dolphins leap through azure waves. There, a prince walks through a field of lilies, and everywhere, the sacred double axe, the labyrinth, marks doorways and shrines with its butterfly silhouette. Listen to the sounds around her. The palace is alive with activity. From the storage magazines below come the voices of scribes tallying great pithoi, ceramic jars taller than a man, filled with olive oil, wine, and grain. Their styluses scratch on clay tablets, recording transactions in a script we call Linear A, a writing system that remains undeciphered to this day, its secrets locked away like whispers in stone. Ariadne pauses at a window, and through it, you can see the surrounding landscape. Crete stretches out in undulating hills, covered with olive groves and vineyards. In the distance, Mount Ida rises toward heaven, snow still clinging to its peak, despite the warm spring day. This is where, legend says, the infant Zeus was hidden from his father Kronos, nursed by a goat in a sacred cave. The priestess continues to the central courtyard, where crowds have gathered. Feel the energy building, like the air before a thunderstorm. The bull-leaping ceremony is not mere entertainment, but a sacred ritual, a dance between human and divine, civilization and wild nature. The bulls have been brought from the mainland, massive aurochs with horns that span wider than a man can reach. You can smell them now, that mixture of animal musk and fresh straw. Hear their hooves scraping against stone as they shift restlessly in their pens. The leapers emerge, young men and women both, for in this ritual, gender matters less than courage and grace. Their bodies are painted with sacred symbols, their hair tied back tightly. They have trained for years for this moment, practicing on wooden bulls, building the strength and timing needed for what comes next. Watch as they warm up, stretching muscles that must be perfect in their response, for a moment's hesitation means death. The first bull is released into the courtyard. Feel the ground tremble slightly under its weight. The beast is magnificent and terrible, its eyes rolling white with confusion and rage. The crowd falls silent. Even the wind seems to hold its breath. The first leaper approaches, a young woman whose name is also lost to time. She times the bull's charge with supernatural calm, waiting, waiting. Then at the last possible moment, she grasps the horns and uses the bull's own momentum to flip herself over its back, landing with cat-like grace behind it. The crowd erupts in appreciation, but the ceremony has only begun. Leaper after leaper takes their turn, some grasping the horns, others vaulting from the side, the most daring attempting backward somersaults over the beast's spine. Not all will survive this day, but those who do will be honoured as touched by divinity itself. As Ariadne watches, she thinks of the stories passed down through generations of priestesses, how their ancestors came from somewhere far to the east, bringing the knowledge of the great goddess and the sacred marriage between earth and sky. She knows the pride of her people, how Minoan ships dominate the eastern Mediterranean, their distinctive pottery found from Egypt to the Levant. This is a civilization at its apex, secure in its power, confident in its gods. But even as she watches the ceremony, strange omens have been troubling her dreams. The earth has been restless lately, trembling in the night like a fitful sleeper. Fishermen speak of the sea pulling back from the shore, exposing the seabed for impossible distances before rushing back with terrible force. And from the island of Thera to the north, travellers bring tales of smoke rising from the sacred mountain. The Minoan civilization presents us with mysteries wrapped in beauty. Their art shows a people in love with life, with nature, with the flowing forms of plants and animals. Unlike their contemporaries, they seem to have had no standing army, no great fortification walls. Their palaces were designed not as fortresses but as centres of administration, religion, and craft production. In their frescoes, we see no scenes of war or conquest, but instead processions of gift-bearers, sacred rituals, and the natural world in all its splendour. What language did they speak when they wrote in Linear A? What names did they call their gods? What songs did they sing as they worked the olive presses or sailed their ships across the wine-dark sea? These questions haunt us still, tablets of clay holding messages we cannot read, like letters from a civilization that speaks to us only through image and artifact. Picture now the great palace at twilight, as Ariadne completes her evening rituals. Oil lamps are being lit throughout the complex, their golden light flickering off painted walls. From somewhere comes the sound of a lyre, its strings plucked in a melody that will never be recovered. In the throne room, Europe's oldest throne sits empty, carved from gypsum, flanked by restored frescoes of griffins, those mythical guardians between worlds. The Minoans gave us the labyrinth, that symbol of life's complex journey, though whether it refers to the palace itself or to some ritual dance pattern, we cannot say. They gave us the image of the Minotaur, that creature born of divine punishment and human failing, dwelling in darkness at the heart of civilization's greatest achievement. These symbols speak to something deep in human consciousness, the thread that guides us through confusion, the monster we must face in the darkness, the price of hubris. As night falls over ancient Crete, Ariadne retires to her chambers. She does not know that within a generation, her entire world will vanish. The palaces will burn, the writing system will be forgotten, and a new people with a new language will occupy these halls. Whether it was the volcanic eruption at Thera, one of history's greatest natural disasters, or invasion by Mycenaean Greeks, or internal collapse, or some combination of all three, the Minoan civilization will fade like a dream upon waking, leaving only fragments of beauty and mystery for us to ponder across the centuries. Section 2. Mycenaean warriors. The scene shifts now to mainland Greece, to the citadel of Pylos in 1300 BC, where the Minoans built open palaces celebrating life. The Mycenaeans constructed fortress cities on commanding heights. Their massive cyclopean walls, made from stones so large that later Greeks believed only giants could have moved them. Listen to the different sounds here. the ring of bronze hammers on anvils, the rasp of whetstones sharpening spear points, the creak of leather armor being fitted, the commanding voices of warriors drilling in the courtyard below. We follow now a master craftsman named Dorios, a bronze smith whose skill in creating armor and weapons has earned him a place of honor in the palace complex. His workshop sits just inside the main gates, where the heat from his furnaces mingles with the Mediterranean sun to create an atmosphere that shimmers like the surface of disturbed water. His hands are scarred from decades of work. Each mark a story of molten metal and split-second timing. Today, Dorios works on a special commission, a full panoply of bronze armor for a young noble preparing for his first campaign. As his hammer strikes the heated metal, listen to the rhythm, steady as a heartbeat, shaping the bronze into forms that will protect human flesh from bronze and stone. With each strike, he thinks of the warrior who will wear this armor, probably no older than 16 summers, eager for glory, untested in the chaos of real combat. The Mycenaeans were a warrior culture, their wealth built on raiding and trading in equal measure. Their society was hierarchical, with a one-axe or king at the apex, supported by a warrior aristocracy that measured wealth in bronze tripods, horses, and slaves. Unlike the Minoans, whose art celebrated nature and religious ceremony, Mycenaean art glorified war and the hunt, those two activities that defined masculine excellence. As Dorios works, he can hear from the courtyard the sound of bards practicing their songs. These are the ancestors of Homer, keeping alive the memories of great deeds through oral poetry. They sing of the war against Troy, that great expedition that united the Achaean kingdoms in common cause. Listen to their words, rhythmic and formulaic, designed to aid memory. Swift-footed Achilles, Hector, tamer of horses, Troy of the wide streets. These epithets will echo through centuries, preserved in the amber of epic poetry. The bronze smith knows these stories well. His grandfather claimed to have forged spear points for the Trojan expedition itself, though whether this is truth or family legend, none can say. What is certain is that a great destruction did befall a city in northwest Anatolia around 1200 BC, a destruction layer that archaeologists would one day uncover, lending credence to the ancient tales. Picture the armor taking shape under Dorios's skilled hands. First, the thorax, the chest piece, hammered from a single sheet of bronze, decorated with spirals that seem to move in the flickering light of the forge. Then the shoulder guards, the arm guards, the greaves for the shins. Each piece must fit perfectly, allowing movement while providing protection. Too heavy, and the warrior will tire quickly in battle. Too light, and a well-placed spear thrust will find its mark. As he works, Dorios thinks about the changing world beyond Pylos's walls. The great palaces still stand at Mycenae, Tiryns, Thebes, Athens, but there are troubling signs. Raiders from the sea have been attacking coastal settlements with increasing boldness. Trade routes that have been secure for generations are becoming dangerous. The Hittite Empire to the east, long a stable trading partner, seems to be collapsing into chaos. From his workshop, Dorios can see the palace scribes hurrying past with their clay tablets. They write in Linear B, an adaptation of the Minoan script for the Greek language. These tablets, baked hard when the palaces burn, will provide future scholars with precious glimpses into this world. Inventories of sheep and goats, lists of offerings to gods both familiar and forgotten, military equipment tallied with bureaucratic precision, the names of workers and their assigned tasks. One name appears repeatedly in these tablets: Poseidon, the Earthshaker, already a major deity for these seafaring warriors. But there are other names too, some recognizable, others mysterious. Potnia, the Lady, perhaps a survival of the Minoan great goddess. Zeus, Skyfather, but not yet king of the gods. Dionysus, surprisingly, that god later Greeks considered foreign and new, already receiving offerings in the Bronze Age palaces. The warrior for whom Dorios crafts armor belongs to a class that fights from chariots, those expensive status symbols that require flat ground and considerable wealth to maintain. Picture them now in your mind, lightweight vehicles of bent wood and woven leather, pulled by specially trained horses, carrying warriors into battle where they would dismount to fight on foot, the chariot serving as both transport and mobile platform for archery. As afternoon fades toward evening, Dorios puts the finishing touches on a bronze helmet, its boar's tusk plates gleaming white against the metal. This style of helmet, with tusks from dozens of wild boars, sewn onto a felt cap and reinforced with bronze, represents enormous wealth and hunting prowess. Each boar had to be hunted down in dangerous close combat, their tusks extracted and shaped. Homer will describe such helmets in loving detail, though by his time they will have passed into legend. The bronze smith steps outside his workshop to cool himself in the evening breeze. From this vantage point, he can see the surrounding countryside, the terraced hills planted with olive trees and vines, the distant blue of the sea, where Mycenaean ships patrol for pirates. This is a landscape shaped by human hands over centuries. Forests cleared for agriculture, harbours improved for shipping, roads carved through mountains to connect palace centres. But change is coming with terrible swiftness. Within a generation of this peaceful evening, the entire palace system will collapse. Pylos will burn so thoroughly that the heat will fire the clay tablets in its archives, preserving them for us to read 3,000 years later. The art of writing will be lost. The careful organization that allowed these palaces to function, with their specialized craftsmen, their long-distance trade networks, their centralized redistribution of goods, will vanish like smoke on the wind. What caused this collapse? The tablets give us hints but no certainty. They speak of watchers by the sea, of military preparations that seem increasingly desperate. One tablet from Pylos appears to be a last-minute deployment of forces to guard the coastline, including the conscription of temple servants and bronze smiths, like Dorios himself, suggesting a final desperate defense against an overwhelming threat. Some scholars point to internal conflict, others to climate change, causing drought and famine, still others to the mysterious sea peoples who appear in Egyptian records as destroyers of cities and kingdoms. Most likely, it was a cascade failure, each problem exacerbating the others, until the entire system, stretched beyond endurance, snapped like an over-tightened lyre string. As night falls over Pylos, Dorios banks his forge fires and prepares for sleep. In his dreams, perhaps he sees visions of the future, the young warrior he has armed falling in desperate defense of the palace gates, the workshops empty and cold, the great frescoes blackened with soot. Or perhaps he dreams of the deeper future, when new Greeks will build temples on the ruins of the palaces, when Homer will sing of this age as a time when heroes walked the earth, when men were stronger and gods more present. The Mycenaean age gave Greece its heroic tradition, that reservoir of stories that would inspire, educate, and entertain for millennia. It established patterns of thought about excellence, honour, and glory that would shape Greek culture long after the palaces fell. Even in the darkest centuries to come, Greeks would remember that their ancestors had been capable of organizing great expeditions, of building mighty walls, of challenging the gods themselves in their pride and ambition. Section 3. The Collapse and Dark Age. Imagine now the same locations 3 generations later, around 1100 BC. Where once great palaces dominated the landscape, only broken walls remain, their stones already being carried away by local farmers to build sheep pens. The workshops are silent, the storerooms empty, their great pithoi shattered, their contents long since consumed or rotted away. Nature has begun to reclaim what humans abandoned. Vines creep through windows, birds nest in throne rooms, and winter rains wash away the painted frescoes that once celebrated human achievement. This is the beginning of what historians call the Greek Dark Age, though darkness is perhaps too strong a word for what was more like a twilight, a dimming of civilization's lights rather than their complete extinction. People still lived in these lands, still farmed and herded, still worshipped their gods and told their stories. But something essential had been lost, some organizing principle that had held the complex palace societies together. Let us follow a potter named Melissa, living in a small village near what was once Mycenae, around 1050 BC. Her name means bee in Greek, and like that industrious insect, she works constantly to keep her family alive in these harder times. Her workshop is nothing like the great pottery facilities of the Palace Age. Instead of dozens of workers producing standardized wares for export across the Mediterranean, she works alone or with her daughter, making simple pots for local use. As her hands shape the clay on a wheel turned by foot power, Melissa embodies the continuity that persisted through collapse. The pottery wheel was not forgotten. The knowledge of clay and fire, of forms and functions, passed from mother to daughter, father to son, through the darkest years. Listen to the sound of her work, the soft squish of wet clay, the rhythmic creaking of the wheel, the scrape of tools shaping and smoothing. These are the same sounds that echoed in palace workshops, now continued in humbler settings. Melissa cannot write. That knowledge died with the palace scribes, but she remembers the stories her grandmother told, who heard them from her grandmother, reaching back to the days when kings ruled from high citadels. These stories have begun to change in the telling, history blending with myth, gods, and mortals intermingling more freely in the absence of written records to fix the narratives in place. She tells these stories to her daughter as they work, their hands busy with clay while their minds journey to the age of heroes. She speaks of Heracles, whose labours took him across the known world, of Perseus, who slew the Gorgon with divine aid, of the great war at Troy, though in her telling it has become something grander and stranger than any historical event, populated by gods who take sides, and heroes who fight rivers. The village where Melissa lives is smaller and simpler than the towns of the Palace Age, perhaps 50 people in total, all related by blood or marriage. Their houses are single-room structures of mud, brick and thatch, clustered together for protection against raiders who might come seeking slaves or what little wealth the village possesses. There is no central authority beyond the village headman, no bureaucracy tallying resources, no professional warriors maintaining order. Yet life continues with its eternal rhythms. Spring brings planting, summer brings growth, autumn brings harvest, winter brings rest and repair. The olive trees still produce their bitter fruit that must be pressed for oil. The vines still yield grapes for wine. The sheep still provide wool and milk, and occasionally meat for special occasions. Listen to these sounds: the bleating of goats on the hillside, the splash of water being drawn from the well, the thud of mortars grinding grain, children laughing as they chase chickens through the dust. New peoples have been moving into Greece during these centuries of upheaval. Later Greeks will call them Dorians, though whether they were invaders, migrants, or simply local populations asserting new identities in the absence of palace control remains debated. They bring with them different dialect of Greek, different customs, different ways of organizing society. In some places, they blend with existing populations. In others, they establish dominance. The linguistic map of classical Greece, with its variety of dialects, begins to take shape. With the palaces gone, trade networks that once spanned the Mediterranean have contracted to local exchanges. The beautiful pottery, the worked ivory, the gold and silver that flowed through palace treasuries have disappeared. Melissa's pots are decorated with simple geometric patterns, circles and triangles, and meanders, painted with a steady hand, but without the elaborate scenes of palace-era pottery. This geometric style, humble as it appears, represents the seeds of a new artistic tradition that will eventually flower into the glory of classical Greek art. Iron has begun to replace bronze as the metal of choice for tools and weapons. This transformation is born of necessity rather than superiority. Iron is actually inferior to bronze in many ways, softer and more prone to rust. But the tin needed to make bronze has become impossible to obtain, with trade routes disrupted. Iron ore, however, can be found locally in many parts of Greece. Picture the village smith working with this new metal, learning through trial and error how to strengthen it through repeated heating and hammering, discovering the techniques that will eventually produce steel. Religion too has changed in these darker times. The great palace shrines have fallen silent, their priestesses and priests scattered, but the gods remain, worshipped now at simple outdoor altars, in sacred groves, at springs and caves, where divine presence seems to linger. Melissa makes offerings at a small shrine to Demeter, goddess of grain, pouring out a measure of barley and oil, praying for good harvest and health for her children. The elaborate rituals of the palace age have given way to simpler, more personal relationships with divinity. As Melissa works, she notices changes in the world around her. The population has declined dramatically. Where once the landscape was dotted with villages and farms, now there are long stretches of empty land reverting to wilderness. Wolves have returned to regions where they had been hunted out generations ago. The nights are darker without the watchfires of palace guards, the stars brighter without the smoke of great sacrifices. Yet there are signs of recovery, tentative as spring's first shoots. Trade is beginning to revive, not the palace-controlled exchange of former times, but ventures by individual merchants willing to risk piracy for profit. Ships from Cyprus and the Levant occasionally appear, bringing Eastern goods and, more importantly, new ideas. One of these ideas will transform Greece: the alphabet. Unlike the syllabic linear B, which required years of training to master, the alphabet can be learned quickly by anyone. It has only 24 signs, each representing a single sound. Melissa will never learn it, but her grandchildren might. This simple system will democratize literacy, making it possible for ordinary people to record their thoughts, their contracts, their prayers, their poetry. The darkness is beginning to lift. Picture, now, a wandering bard arriving in Melissa's village, one autumn evening. These figures, blind Homer among them according to tradition, represent the bridge between the collapse and the revival. They have kept the old stories alive through the dark centuries, preserving in the amber of oral poetry the memory of the age of heroes. But they have also transformed these stories, making them speak to contemporary concerns, weaving in details from their own times, creating from the fragments of history something eternal. The villagers gather in the headman's house, the largest building in the settlement. A fire crackles in the central hearth, its smoke rising through a hole in the roof to join the stars. The bard takes his place of honor, his lyre across his lap, and begins to sing. His voice, trained through years of practice, fills the room with rhythmic words. He sings of Odysseus, that clever wanderer, trying to return home, facing monsters and gods, temptation and despair. The children listen wide-eyed. The adults nod at familiar passages. Melissa's hands pause in their work as she loses herself in the story. This is how culture survives catastrophe, through the determination of ordinary people to continue the essential tasks of living, through the preservation of skills and stories, through the slow adaptation to new circumstances. The Dark Age was not uniform in its darkness. Some regions suffered more than others. Some recovered more quickly. The islands maintained more contacts with the outside world than the interior, but everywhere, life persisted, changed but continuous. As we watch Melissa bank her kiln fires for the night, preparing to sleep in her simple home, we might wonder what dreams came to Greeks in those darker centuries. Did they dream of the palaces their ancestors had known, growing grander and more magical with each generation of distance? Did they dream of the future, of cities yet to be built, ideas yet to be thought, beauty yet to be created? Or did they simply dream the eternal dreams of humanity? Safety for their children, bread for tomorrow, rain for the crops, peace for the evening. The Greek Dark Age teaches us about resilience, about the essential elements of civilization that persist even when superstructures collapse. Writing can be forgotten, but language endures. Palaces can burn, but families continue. Trade networks can fail, but local communities adapt. The darkness was real, a genuine diminishment of material culture, population, and complexity. But it was not absolute. In the geometric patterns on Melissa's pots, in the stories the bards sang, in the iron tools the smiths forged, in the offerings made at simple shrines, the foundations were being laid for what would become classical Greece. The darkness would last nearly 400 years, in some regions, less in others. But when the light returned, when writing reappeared, when cities began to coalesce, when temples rose on ancient foundations, it would be a different light, illuminating a different world. The hierarchical palace societies would not return. Instead, something new would emerge. The polis, the city-state, that revolutionary form of organization that would give birth to democracy, philosophy, and ideals that still shape our world today. As this first act of our story closes, picture Greece in 900 BC, poised between darkness and dawn. The worst has passed. Population is beginning to recover. New settlements are being established. Ships are venturing further from shore. The geometric patterns on pottery are becoming more elaborate, more confident. At Olympia, athletic competitions are being organized that will become, in 876 BC, the first recorded Olympic Games. At Delphi, a shrine to Apollo is gaining reputation for its oracle. In Ionia, across the Aegean, Greek settlers are establishing cities that will become centers of learning and culture. The stage is being set for the extraordinary flowering to come. From the ashes of the Bronze Age collapse, fertilized by the struggles and perseverance of the Dark Age, something unprecedented is about to grow. The Greece we know from history and legend, the Greece of Socrates and Pericles, of Marathon and Thermopylae, of the Parthenon and the Academy, is stirring to life like seeds that have waited through winter for the warmth of spring. Act 2. The Archaic Awakening. Section 4. The Polis emerges. Picture dawn, breaking over the Aegean in 750 BC. The darkness of previous centuries has lifted like morning mist, revealing a transformed landscape. Where once palace fortresses dominated from commanding heights, now hundreds of independent communities dot the countryside, each developing its own identity, its own way of organizing human society. This is the birth of the polis, the city-state, that remarkable invention that would reshape not just Greece but the entire conception of how humans might live together. Let us follow a ship carrying colonists from Corinth, sailing west towards Sicily to establish a new city. Among the passengers is a man named Archias, chosen by Lot to help found what will become Syracuse. He is neither aristocrat nor peasant, but something in between, a farmer who owns enough land to afford bronze armor and weapons, making him a hoplite, one of the heavy infantry that have revolutionized Greek warfare. Listen to the sounds aboard this ship, the creak of oars in their locks, the slap of waves against the hull, the murmur of prayers to Poseidon for safe passage, the excited chatter of families discussing the land that awaits them. These colonists carry with them something precious, more valuable than any gold or bronze. They carry the idea of the polis, the template for creating organized community from empty land. The geography of Greece has shaped this political revolution. Picture the landscape from a bird's perspective. Mountains divide the land into countless small valleys, each naturally self-contained, each capable of supporting a limited population. The sea provides highways between these isolated pockets, but also protection from domination by any single power. This fragmented terrain discouraged the return of centralized kingdoms and encouraged instead the development of fiercely independent communities. As Archias stands at the ship's prow, salt spray dampening his cloak, he thinks about what they will build. First, they will identify the Acropolis, a defensible height where they can retreat in times of danger. Below it, they will lay out the Agora, the open space that serves as market, meeting place, and heart of public life. Around these twin centers, they will organize the city: residential quarters, pottery workshops, smithies, temples to the gods who will protect their new home. But the true innovation of the polis is not its physical structure, but its social organization. In the palace age, a divine king ruled through bureaucratic hierarchy. In the polis, citizens rule themselves through various forms of collective decision-making. Some cities will choose aristocracy, rule by the best families. Others will experiment with democracy, rule by the people. Still others will accept tyrants, strong men who promise order and prosperity. But all share the fundamental assumption that the community, not the ruler, is sovereign. The word citizen itself represents a revolution in human thinking. Archias is not a subject owing obedience to a lord. He is a polites, a member of the polis with rights and responsibilities, expected to fight in its defense, participate in its governance, contribute to its religious festivals. This status does not extend to everyone within the city's territory. Women, slaves, foreign residents will be excluded from political participation. But for those included, citizenship offers something unprecedented: agency in determining their collective fate. The ship reaches Sicily after 2 weeks at sea, guided by stars and coastal landmarks. As they approach the site chosen for their new city, you can smell the wild herbs crushed by their feet as they come ashore. Thyme, oregano, rosemary. The land is fertile, watered by springs, protected by natural harbours. Here they will recreate Corinth in miniature, but also create something new, adapted to local conditions and opportunities. Watch as they perform the founding rituals. Sacred fire brought from Corinth's hearth is used to kindle the first flame in the new city. Boundaries are marked with sacrifice and prayer. Lots are cast to divide the land equitably among the colonists. Each citizen receives a plot within the city walls for his house and a larger portion of farmland in the surrounding territory. This equal distribution, this fresh start, creates a more egalitarian society than the mother city, where old families monopolize the best land. The colonization movement spreads Greek culture across the Mediterranean like seeds on the wind. From the Black Sea to the coast of Spain, new polis spring up, each maintaining emotional and religious ties to its mother city, but politically independent from the moment of founding. Southern Italy becomes so densely settled with Greek cities that Romans will call it Magna Graecia, Greater Greece. Each colony becomes a laboratory for political experimentation, trying different solutions to the eternal problems of governance. Back in mainland Greece, established cities are also transforming. The catalyst for change is military revolution. The old aristocratic warfare, with individual champions fighting duels while others watched, has given way to hoplite warfare. Picture these citizen soldiers in formation, bronze helmets covering their faces, except for eyes and mouth, bronze breastplates protecting their torsos, bronze greaves on their shins, round shields of wood and bronze on their left arms, thrusting spears in their right hands. The hoplite phalanx requires discipline above individual courage. Men stand shoulder to shoulder, each protecting not just himself but the man to his left with his shield. They move as one organism, a bronze-clad wall advancing steadily toward the enemy. Listen to the sounds of phalanx warfare, the rhythmic chanting that keeps everyone in step, the crash of shields meeting shields, the scrape of spear points seeking gaps in bronze armor, the shouts of encouragement and fear. This style of fighting requires practice, coordination, trust. The men who stand beside Archaic in the phalanx are his neighbors, his fellow citizens. They train together in the gymnasium, exercise together, eat together in communal messes. These shared experiences create bonds that transcend family and clan, forging a new kind of collective identity, the citizen body. The gymnasium itself becomes a crucial institution of the polis. Here young men exercise naked, their bodies oiled and gleaming in the Mediterranean Sunday. The word gymnasium comes from gymnos, meaning nude, for Greeks exercise without clothing, a practice that shocks other cultures, but which Greeks see as a mark of civilization. In the gymnasium, aristocrat and craftsman sweat side by side, their social distinctions temporarily erased by shared physical effort. Competition becomes central to Greek culture, not just athletic contests, though these proliferate in every city, but competition in everything. Drama, poetry, music, even beauty. The Olympics, established in 776 BC, according to tradition, are only the most famous of many festivals where Greeks compete for glory. Picture the scene at Olympia during the Games. Tens of thousands gathered from across the Greek world, united by language and culture, despite political divisions, watching their champions compete in foot races, wrestling, boxing, chariot racing. These competitions serve multiple purposes. They provide outlets for aggression that might otherwise lead to war. They allow cities to demonstrate superiority without bloodshed. They create shared experiences that bind the fractious Greek world together. And they embody a fundamental Greek value, the pursuit of arete, excellence or virtue, the desire to be the best possible version of oneself. As Archaic helps build Syracuse's first temple, placing stone upon stone with his own hands alongside hired workers, he embodies another innovation of the polis, the dignity of labour. Unlike aristocratic societies where manual work is despised, many Greek citizens engage in crafts and trade without losing status. The potter, the smith, the merchant can all be citizens, participating in the assembly, serving as jurors, holding public office. Trade transforms the Greek world in this period. The adoption of coinage, invented in Lydia, but perfected by Greeks, revolutionizes commerce. Picture these early coins, lumps of electrum, a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver, stamped with the symbol of the issuing city, a turtle for Aegina, an owl for Athens, a winged horse for Corinth. These coins facilitate trade, allow accumulation of wealth in portable form, enable new forms of economic activity. Ships grow larger and more sophisticated, capable of longer voyages with greater cargoes. Greek merchants established trading posts from Egypt to the Black Sea. They exchange olive oil and wine for grain, pottery for precious metals, finished goods for raw materials. Each transaction spreads Greek culture, language, and ideas, creating a network of connections that binds the Mediterranean world together. The polis also revolutionizes education. Literacy spreads as the alphabet is adapted and refined. By 600 BC, laws are being written on stone for all to see, reducing the arbitrary power of aristocratic judges who previously interpreted oral traditions to their advantage. Schools emerge, where boys learn to read and write, to calculate and sing, to appreciate poetry, and participate in political discourse. Music education becomes particularly important. Young Greeks learn to play the lyre and sing traditional songs that encode cultural values and historical memory. Picture a music lesson in Athens. Boys sitting cross-legged, their small fingers struggling with lyre strings, their voices raised in unison, singing verses from Homer, learning rhythm and harmony, and the power of words wedded to melody. As the sun sets over Syracuse in its first year, Archaic looks out over the growing city with satisfaction. The streets are still dusty paths, the temple still unfinished, the walls more planned than built. But the essential elements are in place. Law rather than arbitrary power, citizens rather than subjects, collective decision-making rather than royal decree. This small community on a foreign shore embodies humanity's greatest political innovation. The idea that free people can govern themselves through reason and debate, rather than force and fear. Section 5. Tyrants and Lawgivers. The scene shifts to Athens in 594 BC, where something extraordinary is unfolding in the Agora. An aristocrat named Solon stands before the assembled citizens, preparing to recite the laws he has been empowered to create. But before we hear his words, let us understand the crisis that brought Athens to this moment. A crisis replicated across the Greek world as the traditional order collapsed under new pressures. Follow a farmer named Thrasybulus as he makes his way to the assembly. His small farm in the Attic countryside barely produces enough to feed his family, and a series of bad harvests has forced him to borrow grain from his wealthy neighbour, using his land as security. Under traditional law, if he cannot repay the debt, he will lose not just his land but his freedom, becoming a debt slave, his labour owned by his creditor, until the obligation is satisfied, which might mean forever. Thrasybulus is not alone in his predicament. All around Athens, small farmers face the same crisis. The introduction of coinage has made debt more precise, more demanding. Where once obligations might have been negotiable, settled through various forms of reciprocity, now they are fixed in silver, inexorable as the seasons but less forgiving. The rich grow richer, accumulating land and dependent labourers. The poor grow desperate, their traditional rights eroding with each failed harvest. Listen to the anger in the streets, the murmur of discontent that threatens to explode into violence. In other cities, such tensions have already erupted in civil war, stasis as the Greeks call it, the most feared of all political conditions. Citizens who should stand together in the phalanx instead face each other across barricades, brother fighting brother, the polis tearing itself apart from within. This crisis has produced an unexpected solution across many Greek cities: tyranny. The word tyrant originally carried no negative connotation. It simply meant a strong man who seized power outside traditional, constitutional arrangements, usually with popular support against aristocratic oppression. These tyrants were often aristocrats themselves, but aristocrats who recognized that the old order was unsustainable, who positioned themselves as champions of the common people against their own class. Picture Pisistratos, who will become Athens' tyrant a generation after Solon. According to legend, he first attempts to seize power by wounding himself and claiming his enemies attacked him, asking for a bodyguard that he then uses to occupy the Acropolis. When this fails, and he is driven into exile, he returns with a brilliant piece of political theatre. He dresses a tall, beautiful woman as the goddess Athena and rides into Athens in a chariot beside her, proclaiming that the goddess herself has chosen him to rule the city. The crowd, whether from genuine belief or willing suspension of disbelief, accepts this divine endorsement. Pisistratos rules Athens for decades, and contrary to what we might expect from the word tyrant, he rules well. He sponsors public works that provide employment, builds temples that glorify the city, supports festivals that unite rich and poor in shared celebration. Under his rule, Athens prospers, trade expands, and the arts flourish. But Athens has chosen a different path this day, in 594 BC. Instead of accepting a tyrant, they have appointed Solon as lawgiver, a temporary position with absolute power to reform the constitution. Solon is uniquely positioned for this role. Though an aristocrat by birth, he has made his fortune in trade rather than land, giving him perspective on both old and new economies. He is also a poet, able to express complex ideas in memorable verse that can be understood by literate and illiterate alike. Listen now as Solon recites his laws in the Agora, his voice carrying across the crowd. First and most dramatically, he announces the Archaic, the shaking off of burdens. All debt slavery is abolished. Those currently enslaved for debt are freed immediately. Those sold abroad must be ransomed and returned. The stone markers that proclaimed land pledged for debt are to be removed and destroyed. Thrasybulus feels a weight lift from his shoulders that is almost physical. His land is his own again, his freedom secure. But Solon does not stop there. He reorganizes Athenian society, not by birth alone but by wealth, creating 4 property classes with different rights and responsibilities. The richest must serve as cavalry and hold the highest offices, bearing the greatest financial burden for the city's defense. The hoplite class, men like Archias who can afford armor, form the backbone of the army and participate fully in political life. Even the poorest citizens, the Thetes who row the ships and fight as light infantry, gain the right to attend the assembly and serve as jurors. This is not democracy, not yet, but it is movement in that direction. Solon creates the Council of 400, chosen by lot from all but the poorest class, to prepare business for the assembly. He establishes popular courts where citizens judge their peers. He makes laws publicly accessible, written down for all to see, reducing the arbitrary power of aristocratic magistrates. Solon's reforms embody the Greek concept of the middle way, avoiding extremes. He does not confiscate aristocratic land to redistribute to the poor, as the radicals demand, nor does he allow the continuation of debt slavery that was destroying the citizen body. His laws seek balance, that elusive equilibrium between competing interests that might allow the polis to function without violence. In Sparta, the solution to similar problems has taken a radically different form. According to tradition, a lawgiver named Lycurgus established the Spartan constitution, though whether he was a historical figure or a mythical embodiment of collective decisions remains debated. Regardless, the system attributed to him creates the most unusual society in Greece, one that fascinates and repels other Greeks in equal measure. The Spartans have solved the problem of inequality among citizens by making all citizen males essentially equal, at least in theory. Land is divided into equal plots that cannot be bought or sold. Citizens are forbidden from engaging in trade or crafts. They eat together in common messes, sharing simple food, black broth that other Greeks find inedible. Even their houses are restricted in luxury, built with only axe and saw, no decorative elements allowed. This equality is made possible by the Helots, the enslaved population of conquered Messenia, who work the land for their Spartan masters. The Helots outnumber the Spartans, perhaps 10 to 1, a constant threat that shapes every aspect of Spartan society. Picture a Spartan citizen walking through the countryside, always armed, always alert, knowing that the people working the fields hate him with generational passion, waiting for any sign of weakness to revolt. The Spartan response to this threat is to become the most disciplined military society the world has ever seen. Boys are taken from their mothers at age 7 to begin the Agora, the training system that will shape them into warriors. They sleep on beds of reeds, they gather themselves, wear a single cloak year-round, learn to steal food to supplement inadequate rations, endure whippings to test their courage. The weak do not survive. Those who do emerge as the finest soldiers in Greece, their reputation alone often enough to deter enemies. Back in Athens, as Solon completes his reforms, he does something remarkable. Having been granted absolute power, he voluntarily relinquishes it. He makes the citizens swear to maintain his laws unchanged for 10 years, then leaves Athens to travel, removing himself as a source of political contention. This act of self-limitation, of refusing power when it could easily be retained, becomes a model of civic virtue that echoes through history. Yet Solon's reforms do not prevent Athens from eventually accepting tyranny. The tensions he tried to balance proved too strong. Pisistratos seizes power, as we have seen, though he maintains most of Solon's laws while adding his own innovations. He sponsors the first official edition of Homer's epics, establishing the texts that will educate Greeks for centuries. He builds the first great temple to Athena on the Acropolis, predecessor to the Parthenon. He creates the Great Panathenaea, the festival that unites all Athenians in celebration of their patron goddess. Throughout Greece, this pattern repeats with variations. Cities oscillate between different forms of government, experimenting with aristocracy, tyranny, oligarchy, and eventually democracy. Each polis becomes a laboratory for political innovation, trying to solve the eternal problems of how to balance freedom and order, equality and excellence, individual desire, and collective need. In Corinth, the tyrant Periander, despite his harsh methods, makes his city the wealthiest in Greece through innovative policies. He builds the Diolkos, a paved trackway across the Isthmus of Corinth that allows ships to be dragged from one sea to another, avoiding the dangerous voyage around the Peloponnese. He standardizes weights and measures, facilitating trade. He sponsors poets and artists, making Corinth a cultural center rivaling Athens. The age of tyrants and lawgivers teaches crucial lessons about power and its limitations. The tyrants, for all their achievements, ultimately fail because their rule depends on personality rather than institutions. When the strong man dies, the system collapses. The lawgivers, by creating constitutions that outlive them, establish more durable settlements. But even the best laws require constant adjustment to changing circumstances, a flexibility that written codes sometimes lack. As this period draws to a close around 500 BC, the Greek world has been transformed. The polis has proven itself a viable form of organization, capable of adapting to different circumstances while maintaining its essential character. Trade has created prosperity that supports unprecedented cultural achievement. The alphabet has democratized literacy. Laws have replaced arbitrary power, at least in theory. Citizens have gained voice in their governance, even if that voice remains limited. Most importantly, Greeks have developed a political consciousness, awareness that different forms of government are possible, that constitutions can be designed rather than simply inherited, that human reason can shape society according to principles of justice rather than mere tradition or force. This consciousness will produce, in the next century, both the glory of Athenian democracy and the disciplined might of Spartan oligarchy, setting the stage for confrontations that will determine not just the fate of Greece, but the direction of Western civilization. Section 6. Gods, Oracles, and Mysteries. Close your eyes and imagine yourself on the sacred way, the road that leads from Athens to Eleusis on a September evening in 500 BC. You are one of thousands making this pilgrimage, seeking initiation into the Eleusinian mysteries, the most sacred and secret religious rites in Greece. The sun sets behind you, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, as you walk the 14 miles that separate the city from the sanctuary where Demeter first mourned her daughter's descent into the underworld. Listen to the sounds around you, the shuffle of countless feet on the ancient road, the bleating of sacrificial animals, the singing of hymns whose words are older than memory, the rattle of sacred objects hidden in baskets that only initiates may see. The air is thick with dust and incense, sweat and anticipation. You have fasted for days in preparation, and hunger makes everything seem more intense, more significant, as if the veil between worlds grows thin. Among the pilgrims walks a young woman named Theano, daughter of a pottery merchant, come to seek initiation as her mother did before her, and her grandmother, stretching back generations beyond counting. The mysteries accept all who speak Greek and have not committed murder, men and women, slave and free, Athenian and foreigner. In this sacred context, the usual divisions of society temporarily dissolve, though they will reassert themselves when the ritual ends. The Greek religious landscape is complex, layered like an ancient city, where each generation builds upon the last. At its foundation lie the chthonic deities, the earth powers worshipped since before memory, Demeter of the grain, Dionysus of the vine, Hecate of the crossroads. Above them, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in tension, stand the Olympian gods brought by waves of migrants and conquerors. Zeus the sky father, Apollo the far shooter, Athena of the gleaming eyes. These gods are not distant abstractions, but immediate presences in Greek life. They have personalities, desires, feuds, love affairs. They can be pleased or angered, bribed or threatened, honoured or neglected. Picture the temples that house them, not churches for congregational worship, but homes for the god's image, where priests and priestesses tend their needs like servants in a great household. The statue must be washed, clothed, fed with sacrifice, entertained with hymns and dances. As Theano walks, she thinks about the story that underlies the mysteries, how Persephone, daughter of Demeter, was abducted by Hades while picking flowers, taken to rule as queen of the underworld. How Demeter wandered the earth in grief, disguised as an old woman, refusing to let anything grow until her daughter was returned. How a compromise was reached. Persephone spends part of the year above ground with her mother, part below with her husband, and thus the seasons cycle between growth and dormancy, life and death. But the mysteries promise something more than agricultural fertility. They offer hope for the afterlife, a blessed existence for initiates beyond the grave. Most Greeks believe the dead persist as strengthless shades in Hades' grey realm, shadows of their former selves. But those initiated at Eleusis are promised something better, though what exactly remains secret, protected by vows of silence that were almost never broken across 1,000 years of practice. The procession reaches Eleusis as full darkness falls. Torches are lit, hundreds of them, creating a river of fire flowing into the sanctuary. The initiates are led to the Telesterion, the great hall of initiation, a building that can hold thousands, its forest of columns creating mysterious spaces of light and shadow. What happens inside remains one of history's great secrets. We know there was a sacred drama enacting Demeter's search for Persephone. We know sacred objects were revealed. We know there was a moment of brilliant light in darkness. But the details died with the last initiates. The next morning, let us travel north to Delphi, the Omphalos, the navel of the world. Here, where two eagles released by Zeus from opposite ends of the earth met, stands the most important oracle in Greece. The sanctuary clings to the slopes of Mount Parnassus, and as you approach, you can see the treasuries built by grateful cities, small temples containing offerings of gold and silver, bronze and ivory, tangible proof of Apollo's power to shape human fate. At the heart of the complex stands the Temple of Apollo, and within it, the inner sanctum where the Pythia, Apollo's priestess, delivers oracles. Picture her, a woman past childbearing age, chosen from the local population, who on sacred days descends into a chamber below the temple floor. There, seated on a tripod above a fissure in the earth, she breathes vapours that modern geology suggests might have been ethylene gas, inducing an altered state of consciousness. A delegation from Corinth has come seeking guidance about establishing a new colony. They have brought rich gifts, a silver bowl worked with images of gods and heroes, a dozen white bulls for sacrifice, gold coins bearing their city's winged horse. The question they pose must be carefully formulated, for Apollo's responses are notoriously ambiguous. The famous example is Croesus of Lydia, who asked if he should attack Persia and was told he would destroy a great empire. He did, but the empire destroyed was his own. Watch as the Pythia enters her trance. Her body convulses, her eyes roll back. Strange sounds emerge from her throat. The priests interpret these utterances, transforming them into hexameter verse that will be carried back to Corinth. The oracle speaks, "Where the bronze man meets the sea, there build your city, and prosperity will follow." The delegation must puzzle out this riddle, search for a place that matches the description, trust that Apollo has guided them truly. The oracle at Delphi serves functions beyond divination. It is a center of international diplomacy, where conflicts can be mediated under divine sanction. It maintains the sacred calendar, determining when festivals should be held. It grants or withholds divine approval for colonies, wars, constitutional changes. The priests maintain vast archives, recording responses and outcomes, accumulating practical wisdom, disguised as divine knowledge. But not all Greek religion happens in grand sanctuaries. Return with Theano to Athens, where she participates in the Thesmophoria, a festival restricted to married women, honouring Demeter in her role as lawgiver. For 3 days, the women of Athens abandon their households, camping together in temporary shelters on the Pnyx hill. They fast, perform secret rituals, tell stories that men are forbidden to hear. On the 2nd day, they sit on the ground in mourning for Persephone's abduction, neither eating nor drinking, sharing the grief of the goddess. On the 3rd day, they feast and celebrate, performing ribald humour and obscene jests that would shock their husbands, temporarily inverting social norms. These rituals, anthropologists suggest, serve as safety valves for social tensions, allowing women space to express frustrations and forge solidarity away from male supervision. Religion also manifests in smaller, more personal ways. Every household has its altar to Hestia, goddess of the hearth, where the family fire must never be extinguished. Before every meal, a small offering is made to her. When a child is born, it is carried around the hearth to place it under divine protection. When someone dies, the hearth fire is extinguished and must be rekindled from pure sources, marking the family's renewal after loss. Picture the crossroads shrines to Hecate, where 3 paths meet. Here travellers leave small offerings, bread, eggs, honey cakes, seeking protection for their journeys. On new moon nights, more elaborate offerings appear, placed by those seeking the goddess's aid in matters best conducted in darkness. Hecate is a liminal deity, standing at boundaries between life and death, light and dark, civilization and wilderness. Her worship reminds us that Greek religion encompassed not just the bright Olympians, but older, darker powers that could not be ignored. The god Dionysus represents another kind of religious experience, ecstatic, transformative, dangerous. His worship involves wine, dance, and the temporary dissolution of normal identity. Picture his followers, mostly women called Maenads, dancing themselves into frenzy in torchlit forests, experiencing divine possession that frees them from social constraints. This religion of release, of temporary madness, provides balance to the orderly, rational aspects of Greek culture. In the mountains of Arcadia, older traditions persist, barely changed from prehistoric times. Here Pan, the goat-footed god, still inspires sudden terror in lonely places, the panic that gives him his name. Here Zeus Lycaios receives offerings that proper Greeks prefer not to discuss, hints of human sacrifice in the distant past, or perhaps not so distant. Here, the boundary between human and animal, civilization and wildness, remains permeable. Mystery cults proliferate across the Greek world, each offering its own path to divine favour or blessed afterlife. The Orphic mysteries teach that the soul is imprisoned in the body, seeking release through multiple reincarnations and ritual purity. The Cabarian mysteries on Samothrace, promise protection at sea. The Dionysian mysteries offer wine-fueled communion with the god. Each has its own initiation rites, secret teachings, promised rewards. These mysteries serve psychological and social functions beyond their religious meaning. They provide community for those displaced by trade or war, creating artificial families bound by shared secrets rather than blood. They offer hope to those for whom traditional religion provides little comfort. Slaves, women, foreigners, the poor. They allow emotional expression in cultures that often demand rigid self-control. They promise that current suffering has meaning, that divine justice will eventually prevail. As our exploration of Greek religion concludes, picture one final scene. It is dawn at the small shrine of Panhodios, Hermes of the Road, that stands where the path from Athens to Eleusis crosses a stream. Theano, now initiated into the mysteries, pauses on her way home to leave a small offering, a honey cake she saved from the post-initiation feast. She speaks no elaborate prayer, just a simple, "Remember me, Lord," on my journeys. This small act encapsulates Greek religion, practical, reciprocal, embedded in daily life. The gods are not loved in the Christian sense, but honored, propitiated, bargained with. They are powerful neighbors who must be treated with respect, dangerous allies whose favor must be constantly maintained. Religion is not separate from other aspects of life, but woven through everything: politics, war, agriculture, trade, birth, marriage, death. The religious landscape of Greece, with its multiple cults, competing traditions, and local variations, mirrors the political fragmentation of the Polis system. Just as there is no unified Greek state, there is no unified Greek church. Each city has its patron deity, its particular festivals, its local myths. Yet underlying this diversity are shared assumptions, common practices, stories known from Ionia to Sicily that create cultural unity despite political division. This religious complexity will profoundly influence Western thought. The tension between reason and mystery, between public religion and private spirituality, between traditional observance and personal experience, all have roots in Greek practice. The philosophical critique of religion, beginning with Xenophanes and continuing through Socrates and Plato, emerges from this context of religious diversity. If different cities tell different stories about the gods, might all these stories be human creations? As Theano reaches Athens, the city is awakening to a new day. Smoke rises from altars as morning sacrifices begin. Priests open temple doors to let divine images see the sunrise. In the Agora, someone pours a libation before beginning trade. On the Acropolis, the eternal flame in Athena's sanctuary burns on, tended by priestesses who trace their lineage to the ancient kings. The sacred and profane intermingle like smoke and morning air, inseparable aspects of the complete life that Greeks call eudaimonia, human flourishing under divine observation. Act 3. The Classical Pinnacle. Section 7. Athens and Democracy's Birth. Picture Athens in 508 BC, on a morning that will transform the nature of power itself. In the Agora, beneath the watchful gaze of Athena's temple on the Acropolis above, thousands of citizens gather to hear a proposal that sounds like madness to most of the Greek world. Cleisthenes, an aristocrat from the ancient Alcmaeonid family, stands before them preparing to suggest that ordinary people, farmers and potters and shipbuilders, should have the final say in governing their city. Let us follow a potter named Nicias through this revolutionary day. His workshop sits just off the Agora, close enough that he can hear the assembly's debates while his wheels spin. His hands, stained with clay that never quite washes clean, have shaped thousands of vessels, but today they will help shape something far more significant: the world's first democracy. As he wipes his hands on his leather apron and walks toward the gathering crowd, he represents something unprecedented, an ordinary citizen about to receive extraordinary power. The path to this moment has been long and bloody. After the tyrant Hippias was expelled with Spartan help, Athens descended into civil conflict between aristocratic factions. Cleisthenes, defeated in traditional political maneuvering by his rival Isagoras, did something revolutionary. He turned to the demos, the common people, promising them power in exchange for support. Adding the people to his faction, as Herodotus puts it, though the dry phrase barely captures the magnitude of this transformation. Listen to Cleisthenes as he explains his reforms to the assembly. His voice carries across the crowd, trained by years of aristocratic education in rhetoric and performance. First, he proposes to reorganize the very structure of Athenian society. The 4 traditional tribes, based on ancient kinship groups and dominated by aristocratic families, will be replaced by 10 new tribes, artificially created to break the power of established networks. Each new tribe will contain citizens from 3 different regions: the city, the coast, and the inland. Picture a map of Attica being redrawn, not according to natural boundaries or traditional associations, but according to mathematical principles designed to prevent any geographic faction from dominating. A coastal merchant, an urban craftsman, and an inland farmer must now cooperate as fellow tribesmen, their diversity becoming strength rather than division. But the true revolution lies in what Cleisthenes calls isonomia, equality before the law. The council of 550 men from each tribe chosen by lot will set the agenda for the assembly. Think about the radical nature of selection by lot, the assumption that any citizen is capable of governance, that expertise matters less than avoiding corruption. A potter like Nicias might find himself sitting in council beside aristocrats who trace their lineage to the gods, and his voice will carry equal weight. The assembly itself, the ecclesia, becomes sovereign. Any citizen can speak, propose legislation, argue for war or peace. Picture the scene on the Phoenix Hill, where the assembly meets, 6,000 citizens or more, seated on the rocky slope, the speaker's platform below them, so that speakers must literally look up to the people. The acoustics are perfect, a testament to Greek understanding of sound. Even those in the back rows can hear every word, every argument that will determine their collective fate. Watch as Nicias raises his hand to vote for the first time on a matter of state. This simple gesture, multiplied by thousands, represents a transfer of power that kings and aristocrats across the ancient world view with horror. Farmers who smell of earth and sweat, craftsmen with calloused hands, sailors who worship foreign gods in distant ports, all have say equal to the wealthiest aristocrat in determining Athens' future. The new democracy requires new institutions. The popular courts, where citizens chosen by lot serve as both judge and jury, handle everything from murder to contract disputes. Picture a trial in session, 500 citizens listening to arguments, no professional lawyers, just citizens speaking for themselves or asking friends to speak for them. Water, clocks time, the speeches, ensuring equality of opportunity. When arguments conclude, the jurors vote immediately by dropping bronze ballots into urns, their verdict final with no appeal possible. Ostracism, that uniquely democratic institution, embodies both the promise and peril of people power. Once a year, the assembly can vote to exile any citizen for 10 years. No crime necessary, just the perception that someone has grown too powerful, too dangerous to democratic equilibrium. Picture citizens scratching names on pottery shards, ostraka, from which the practice takes its name. The man receiving the most votes must leave within 10 days, a reminder that in democracy, no one is indispensable. Yet this democracy rests on exclusions that would trouble modern minds. Women, half the population, have no political voice. Slaves, perhaps a third of Attica's inhabitants, are property, not persons. Metics, foreign residents who contribute much to Athens' economy, can never become citizens, regardless of their contributions. Democracy means rule by the demos, but the demos is carefully defined to exclude more than it includes. Nicias knows slaves work in the silver mines at Laurium, their labour, in hellish conditions, funding the democracy he enjoys. He sees women managing households with skill that matches any politician, yet they cannot attend the assembly. He works beside metics who have lived in Athens for generations, who speak no other language, worship no other gods, yet remain forever outside the citizen body. These contradictions do not trouble him as they might trouble us, for he lives in a world where hierarchy seems natural, divinely ordained. The young democracy faces immediate challenges. Sparta, alarmed by this radical experiment, sends troops to restore traditional aristocracy, but something remarkable happens. The Athenian citizens, including many who had opposed Cleisthenes, unite against foreign intervention. They defeat the Spartans, the Boeotians, and the Chalcidians in rapid succession, attributing their success to the energy released by political freedom. As Herodotus observes, while oppressed, they acted like men working for a master, but freed, each was eager to achieve for himself. New rituals reinforce democratic identity. The 10 tribes compete against each other in dramatic and choral competitions, fostering both unity and rivalry. Young men of 18, the ephebes, swear an oath to defend the democracy, touring the borders of Attica to learn the land they must protect. The Panathenaea festival, celebrating Athena's birthday, becomes a demonstration of democratic participation, with citizens from all tribes contributing to the great procession that winds up to the Acropolis. In his workshop, Nicias begins producing vessels with new imagery, where once he painted scenes of aristocratic symposia or mythological heroes, now he depicts the institutions of democracy, citizens voting, jurors listening to speeches, the drawing of lots for office. These humble pots, traded across the Mediterranean, become propaganda for a revolutionary idea, spreading the concept of citizen self-governance far beyond Athens' borders. The democracy also transforms Athenian character, or perhaps reveals what was always latent. The city becomes notorious for energy, innovation, restlessness. The Athenians are addicted to innovation, Thucydides will write, and their designs are characterized by swiftness alike in conception and execution. This dynamism, this willingness to experiment, flows from the democratic assumption that change is possible, that human intelligence can improve on tradition. Yet democracy is exhausting. Picture Nicias on a typical day, morning in his workshop, afternoon in the assembly, debating foreign policy, evening serving on a jury judging a property dispute. Democracy demands time, attention, emotional investment. It requires citizens to have opinions on everything, from sewer construction to declaring war. It assumes a level of engagement that aristocratic or monarchical subjects never need to achieve. The payment for public service, introduced later, but logical extension of democratic principles, acknowledges this burden. Citizens receive a small sum for jury duty, for attending the assembly, for holding office. This is not corruption, but recognition that democracy requires the poor to sacrifice income to participate. Without such payment, democracy would become plutocracy, ruled by those wealthy enough to afford participation. As night falls over Athens in this first year of democracy, Nicias returns to his workshop. His hands return to clay, shaping vessels that will outlast the democracy itself, carrying wine and oil and grain across the Mediterranean. But his mind remains in the assembly, replaying arguments, planning what he might say tomorrow on the question of building new ships. For the first time in his life, what he thinks matters beyond his own household. His voice, one among thousands, helps determine the fate of cities and nations. This birth of democracy is messy, incomplete, hypocritical by modern standards. It excludes more than it includes, rests on slavery, denies women agency, treats foreigners with suspicion. Yet it represents a breakthrough in human consciousness, the idea that ordinary people possess political wisdom, that collective decision-making can surpass autocratic decree, that power should flow upward from citizens rather than downward from rulers. The Athenian experiment will last, with interruptions, for almost 2 centuries. It will inspire imitation and horror in equal measure. It will produce achievements in art, literature, philosophy, and architecture that still define excellence. It will also produce disasters, imperial overreach, judicial murders, mob hysteria. Democracy's vices and virtues are inseparable, both flowing from the fundamental premise that people should rule themselves. Section 8. The Persian War's Crucible. The year is 490 BC, and on the plain of Marathon, 26 miles from Athens, 10,000 Greek hoplites face an Persian army at least twice their size, perhaps more. The morning sun, rising over the Aegean, glints off bronze armour and spear points, creating a field of deadly light. Among the Athenian ranks stands a veteran warrior named Callimachus, the polemarch or war archon, whose vote this day has broken a deadlock among the 10 generals, deciding that Athens will fight rather than wait behind its walls. Listen to the sounds before battle, the nervous shuffling of feet, the clatter of spear butts on shields as men find their rhythm, prayers, muttered to gods and heroes, the wine of libations poured onto thirsty earth. Across the plain, you can hear the Persian army, its many languages blending into an ominous murmur, the neighing of cavalry horses, the creak of wicker shields, the commands of officers trying to organize troops drawn from across the largest empire the world has ever seen. This confrontation has been building for 2 decades, ever since Greek cities in Ionia revolted against Persian rule with Athenian support. The Persians have come seeking punishment for this interference, to add these small, quarrelsome Greek cities to an empire that stretches from India to Egypt. To the Persian king Darius, this is a minor punitive expedition to the far western edge of his realm. To the Greeks, it is a struggle for existence itself. Callimachus stands in the position of honour on the right wing. He is 50 years old, his body scarred from previous battles, his mind sharp from years of political manoeuvring in Athens' new democracy. He voted for immediate attack, not from bloodlust, but from strategic calculation. The Persians have landed at Marathon because it offers good cavalry ground and a direct route to Athens. Every day, the Greeks' delay increases the chance that Persian gold will open Athens' gates from within, that the democracy's enemies will stage a coup. The tactical problem seems impossible. The Persians have cavalry and archers, weapons that can destroy a hoplite phalanx before it closes to spear range. Traditional Greek warfare involves 2 phalanxes meeting at walking pace, pushing against each other until one breaks. But the general Miltiades has proposed something revolutionary. The Greeks will run. Picture this moment as the trumpet sounds the advance. 10,000 men in bronze armour, each carrying 60 pounds of equipment, begin jogging across 8 stadia, nearly a mile, toward the Persian lines. This is not a sprint, which would be impossible in full armour, but a steady, purposeful advance at twice normal speed. The Persian archers loose their arrows, thousands of them darkening the sky, but the Greeks have timed their charge perfectly. They pass through the killing zone before the archers can release more than a few volleys. The crash when the lines meet is audible for miles. Bronze on wicker, iron on flesh, the screams of the wounded, mixing with the war cries of the combatants. The Greek wings, strengthened at the expense of the centre, smash into the Persian flanks. Feel the press of bodies, the heat trapped under bronze armour, the dust that makes breathing difficult, the metallic taste of fear and adrenaline. This is the athismos, the push, where physical strength and psychological will merge into a single contest. In the centre, the Persian elite troops, the immortals, push back the weakened Greek line. For a moment, it seems the battle might be lost, but this is part of Miltiades' plan. As the Persians advance in the center, the victorious Greek wings wheel inward, enveloping the Persian army in a deadly embrace. The battle becomes a slaughter. Persians flee toward their ships, Greeks pursuing with the energy that comes from unexpected victory. Callimachus does not survive the victory he helped create. He falls in the final push toward the Persian ships, one of only 192 Athenians killed, a miraculously small number that will be remembered with reverence. The Persians lose 6,400 men, their bodies left on the field for birds and dogs, a sight that will haunt Greek memory with both pride and horror. But the victory is not yet complete. The Persian fleet, instead of retreating, sails around Cape Saunion toward Athens, hoping to find the city undefended. According to legend, the runner Phidippides races the 26 miles to Athens, gasps out, "We have won," and dies, though this story may conflate different traditions. What is certain is that the Athenian army makes its own forced march back to Athens, arriving just as the Persian fleet appears off the coast. Seeing the same men who defeated them at Marathon, now defending Athens' port, the Persians finally accept defeat and sail home. The victory at Marathon transforms Greek consciousness. A citizen army has defeated the professional troops of the world's greatest empire. Democracy has proven itself in the ultimate test of war. The Athenians dedicate a treasury at Delphi, filled with Persian spoils. They commission a painting of the battle for the Stoa Poikile, where citizens can daily remind themselves of their finest hour. The dead are buried on the battlefield, their names inscribed on stone, creating a memorial that still stands today. 10 years pass. The Persians return, this time in overwhelming force. Xerxes, son of Darius, has assembled an army so large that ancient sources struggle to describe it, giving impossible numbers in the millions. Modern historians suggest perhaps 200,000 soldiers and a similar number of support personnel, still the largest army ever to invade Europe from Asia. They build a bridge of boats across the Hellespont, dig a canal through the Mount Athos Peninsula, establish supply depots along their route. This is not a punitive raid, but an invasion intended to permanently incorporate Greece into the Persian Empire. The scene shifts to the narrow pass at Thermopylae, the hot gates, where thermal springs create an otherworldly landscape of steam and stone. Here, 300 Spartans under King Leonidas, along with about 7,000 other Greeks, prepare to hold back the Persian tide. Among them stands a Spartan warrior named Dionysus, famous for his dark humour. When told that Persian arrows will be so numerous they will blot out the sun, he replies, "Good, then we will fight in the shade." Picture the geography that makes this stand possible. Mountains on one side, sea on the other, a passage in places only wide enough for a single cart. The Greeks build a wall across the narrowest point and wait. For 2 days, they repel everything Xerxes sends against them. The Persian infantry, armed with shorter spears and lighter armour, cannot match the disciplined weight of the phalanx in such confined space. Bodies pile up, creating additional obstacles. The sea turns red with blood. Listen to the sounds of this battle. The rhythmic chanting of the Spartans as they advance and retreat in perfect unison, the crash of bronze on wicker and wood, the screams in dozen languages as men fall wounded, the hiss of arrows finding gaps in armour, the splash of bodies falling into the sea. The Spartans fight with mechanical precision, rotating fresh troops to the front, maintaining their formation regardless of losses. On the third day, betrayal accomplishes what force could not. A local Greek, Ephialtes, whose name will become synonymous with traitor, shows the Persians a mountain path that bypasses the Greek position. When Leonidas learns he is being flanked, he dismisses most of the Greek forces but remains with his 300 Spartans, plus Thespians and Thebans, who refuse to leave. They know they will die. That is the point. Their deaths will buy time for Greece to prepare and inspire resistance that might otherwise crumble. The last stand of the 300 becomes legend before the bodies are cold. They fight with spears until the spears break, then with swords until the swords break, then with hands and teeth. Leonidas falls, and a fierce battle rages over his body. The survivors make a final stand on a small hill, where Persian arrows finally end their resistance. Xerxes, enraged by the losses they have inflicted, orders Leonidas's body crucified and beheaded, a sacrilege that shocks even Persians accustomed to brutal displays. While Thermopylae falls, the Greek fleet fights a parallel battle in the Straits of Artemisium. Here, Athenian triremes, those magnificent rowing ships with bronze rams, prove they can match Persian numbers with superior seamanship. The trireme represents Athens' democratic character made manifest. 200 rowers, mostly poor citizens, working in perfect coordination, their collective effort creating a weapon that can shatter enemy hulls. Athens faces an agonizing decision. The oracle at Delphi has spoken of wooden walls that will save the city. Some interpret this as the ancient walls of the Acropolis, but Themistocles, Athens' greatest politician, argues it means the fleet. He convinces the Athenians to evacuate their city, sending women and children to safety while men board the ships. Picture the heartbreak of abandoning homes, temples, everything that cannot be carried, trusting to divine prophecy and human courage. Xerxes enters Athens, unopposed, burning temples, destroying monuments, erasing decades of cultural achievement in days of flames. From the island of Salamis, Greek refugees watch smoke rise from their burning city. But Themistocles has set a trap. The narrow straits of Salamis negate Persian numerical superiority. The heavier Greek ships with their trained rowers prove superior in close combat. The Battle of Salamis unfolds like a deadly dance on water. Picture Xerxes watching from a golden throne on the shore as his magnificent fleet crowds into the straits. The Greek ships back water, drawing the Persians deeper into the trap. Then, at a signal, they surge forward. Bronze rams splinter wood. Ships collide and grapple. Marines leap between vessels, fighting desperate battles on tilting decks. Persian ships, trying to retreat, collide with others still advancing. The sea fills with wreckage and drowning men. Among the Greek fleet fights a woman, Queen Artemisia of Halicarnassus, commanding ships for the Persians. When escape seems impossible, she rams and sinks another Persian vessel, convincing Greek pursuers she has changed sides. Xerxes, watching this, comments that his men have become women and his women men. Artemisia's pragmatic ruthlessness earns his respect, if not his victory. The Persian fleet breaks, losses mounting beyond calculation. Xerxes, fearing the Greeks will destroy his bridge over the Hellespont and trap him in Europe, retreats with most of his army. He leaves a force under Mardonius to continue the campaign, but the myth of Persian invincibility has been shattered. The following year, at Plataea and Mycale, Greek armies and fleets complete the victory, driving Persian forces from European soil. These wars forge a new Greek identity. Previously, Greeks identified primarily with their individual cities. Now, they have stood together against a common enemy, recognized shared values worth defending. The battles become founding myths for Western civilization. Free citizens defeating imperial subjects, quality overcoming quantity, intelligence defeating mere force. These interpretations oversimplify complex realities, but contain enough truth to inspire for millennia. For Athens, victory brings unprecedented confidence. The democracy that produced Marathon and Salamis must be divinely favoured. The fleet that saved Greece becomes the instrument of empire. The ruins left by Persian destruction create opportunities to rebuild on grander scales. From the ashes of the Persian Wars rises the Golden Age of Athens, a half-century of achievement that still defines cultural excellence. Section 9. The Golden Age of Pericles. Stand on the Acropolis of Athens in 438 BC, surrounded by construction that will produce the most perfect buildings ever created by human hands. The Parthenon rises before you, its columns precisely calculated to correct for optical illusions, each one unique yet harmonizing into unity. The architect Iktinos and the sculptor Phidias work alongside hundreds of craftsmen, citizens, and metics and slaves, transforming Pentelic marble into a hymn to divine proportion. At the center of this activity stands Pericles, the man who will give his name to Athens' greatest age. He is not a tyrant or king, but a democratically elected leader who has maintained influence through persuasion and vision for nearly 30 years. Picture him now, tall and dignified, wearing a helmet to hide his unusually elongated skull that attracts mockery from comic poets. His voice, trained by the best teachers, can hold the assembly spellbound for hours. Follow the master sculptor Phidias as he supervises work on the chryselephantine statue of Athena Parthenos that will stand 40 feet tall inside the Parthenon. The statue's gold and ivory alone cost more than the entire building. Phidias obsesses over every detail: the Nike in Athena's right hand, the shield depicting Athenians fighting Amazons, the sandals showing centaurs and lapiths in combat. Each element tells a story: civilization triumphing over barbarism, order over chaos, Athens over its enemies. The Parthenon itself embodies mathematical perfection, married to artistic vision. Its columns lean slightly inward. If extended, they would meet a mile above the building. The corner columns are thicker than the others, to compensate for light bleeding around them. The floor curves upward, imperceptibly, preventing the optical illusion of sagging. These refinements, invisible to casual observation, create a sense of living perfection, a building that seems to breathe. But the Golden Age encompasses far more than architecture. In the Theatre of Dionysus, on the southern slope of the Acropolis, dramatic festivals showcase humanity's greatest literary achievements. Picture a spring day in 428 BC, when Sophocles presents Antigone for the first time. 15,000 citizens pack the outdoor theatre, watching as masked actors explore the conflict between divine law and human authority, individual conscience and state power. The audience sits transfixed as Antigone defies King Creon's order, insisting on burying her brother according to religious custom. Her words ring across the centuries: "I was born to join in love, not hate." The play asks questions that democracy makes urgent. What happens when law conflicts with justice? When does civil disobedience become duty? Can the state demand obedience that violates conscience? These are not abstract philosophical problems, but immediate political concerns in a democracy where citizens must both obey and create law. In the Agora below, another kind of drama unfolds daily. Here walks a peculiar figure, Socrates, the stonecutter's son who has abandoned his trade to become Athens' gadfly. He is ugly by Greek standards, with bulging eyes, snub nose, and pot belly, yet he attracts the city's brightest young minds. Watch as he engages a confident young aristocrat in conversation, asking seemingly simple questions that reveal the youth knows far less than he thought. "What is courage?" Socrates asks. The young man gives conventional answers, standing firm in battle, facing danger without fear. But Socrates' persistent questioning reveals contradictions. Is foolhardiness courage? Is the calculated retreat of a skilled general cowardice? By dialogue's end, the youth admits he does not know what courage is, though he has displayed it in battle. This is Socrates' method, revealing ignorance as the first step toward wisdom. Socrates embodies the intellectual revolution that accompanies Athens' political and artistic achievements. Traditional wisdom, accepted on authority, crumbles under rational examination. Everything becomes questionable: the nature of the gods, the origin of laws, the purpose of human existence. This intellectual freedom thrills some and terrifies others. The comic poet Aristophanes will mock Socrates in The Clouds, depicting him as corrupting youth with dangerous ideas, a charge that will eventually prove fatal. The Athenian Empire funds this cultural explosion. 400 cities pay tribute, their contributions flowing into Athens' treasury. The Delian League, founded as a voluntary alliance against Persia, has become an Athenian empire maintained by force. When Naxos tries to leave the alliance, Athens besieges it into submission. When Melos refuses to join, Athens executes its men and enslaves its women and children. The democracy that champions freedom at home practices imperialism abroad. Pericles justifies empire with breathtaking honesty. In his funeral oration for those fallen in war, recorded or recreated by Thucydides, he declares Athens the school of Hellas, a city so magnificent that subjects should feel privileged to serve it. He celebrates Athenian openness, energy, and achievement. "We are lovers of beauty without extravagance," he proclaims, "and lovers of wisdom without unmanliness." The speech remains one of history's greatest articulations of democratic values, even as it glosses over democracy's contradictions. Women exist at the margins of this golden age, their contributions largely unrecorded, yet we catch glimpses of remarkable figures. Aspasia, Pericles' companion, runs an intellectual salon where philosophers and politicians gather. She is credited with teaching rhetoric to Socrates himself, though such claims may be comic exaggeration or hostile propaganda. As a foreign woman, she cannot marry Pericles legally, yet she influences Athenian policy, ghostwriting speeches, advising on strategy. Picture one of Aspasia's gatherings. In a comfortable room overlooking the Agora, couches arranged for conversation rather than symposium drinking, men and women discussing philosophy, politics, poetry. This mixed gathering violates social norms. Respectable Athenian women should remain home, invisible and unmentioned. Yet here ideas flow freely across gender boundaries, creating a space for intellectual exchange that formal institutions deny. The visual arts reach unprecedented heights during this period. The painter Polygnotus creates vast murals depicting mythological scenes with psychological depth. The sculptor Myron captures motion in bronze so perfectly that his discobolus seems about to release the discus. Polyclitus establishes mathematical ratios for the perfect human form, his Dorophorus becoming the canon against which all subsequent sculpture is measured. In medicine, Hippocrates of Kos revolutionizes healing by insisting on natural rather than supernatural causes for disease. His followers observe symptoms systematically, recording case histories that build empirical knowledge. The Hippocratic Oath, still sworn by doctors today in modified form, establishes medical ethics. Do no harm, maintain patient confidentiality, teach the next generation. Disease becomes something to be understood and treated, not merely endured as divine punishment. The sophists arrive in Athens, travelling teachers who claim to teach arete, excellence or virtue, for a fee. Protagoras declares, "Man is the measure of all things," suggesting truth is relative to perception. Gorgias teaches rhetoric so powerful it can make the weaker argument appear stronger. A skill democracy makes valuable, but which traditionalists find deeply disturbing. These ideas challenge fundamental assumptions about truth, justice, and the gods. Yet darkness shadows this golden age. In 430 BC, plague strikes Athens, its population crowded within walls, while Spartans ravage the countryside outside. Thucydides, who survives the disease, describes symptoms in clinical detail: fever, inflammation, insatiable thirst, livid pustules. But worse than physical symptoms is social breakdown. Sacred burial customs abandoned, the sick left to die alone, lawlessness as people pursue pleasure, believing death imminent. Pericles himself falls victim to the plague in 429 BC, though not before seeing his legitimate sons die, leaving only his son by Aspasia to carry his name. His death marks the end of stable leadership. Demagogues arise, promising easy victories, appealing to worse instincts. The democracy that produced the Parthenon will also produce the judicial murder of Socrates, the massacre at Melos, the disastrous Sicilian expedition. Yet the achievements of the Golden Age transcend its failures. In barely 2 generations, Athens creates forms of expression, modes of thought, standards of beauty that will define excellence for millennia. The Parthenon's proportions influence architecture, from the Renaissance to modern democracy's Capitol buildings. Sophocles' exploration of human nature provides templates for psychological understanding. Socrates' method of questioning establishes philosophy as disciplined inquiry rather than mystical pronouncement. Picture Athens at sunset, the marble of new buildings glowing golden in dying light. On the Acropolis, priests prepare evening sacrifices to Athena. In the theatre, audiences disperse, discussing the day's performances. In private homes, symposia begin, wine mixed with water, conversations turning from politics to philosophy to love. In workshops, craftsmen put away tools, their day's labour contributing to the city's glory. This is a city fully alive, pushing boundaries of human achievement in every direction simultaneously. Its energy is almost frightening, its ambition boundless, its confidence absolute. Citizens walk with the swagger of those who know they are making history, that future ages will look back at them with awe. They are right, though perhaps not in the way they imagine. For this golden moment, lasting barely 50 years, Athens achieves something unprecedented. A society where ordinary citizens govern themselves while producing extraordinary culture, where political freedom generates intellectual revolution, where democracy and excellence reinforce rather than undermine each other. The tensions are obvious, the contradictions real, the failures ultimately fatal. But for this brief moment, humanity glimpses possibilities that will inspire, challenge, and haunt the centuries to follow. As night falls over Athens, oil lamps illuminate workshops where potters still turn wheels, scribes copy texts, philosophers argue into darkness. The city that never seems to sleep continues its restless pursuit of greatness, unaware that its golden age is already beginning its transformation into memory, into model, into myth. The Peloponnesian War looms, bringing devastation that will break Athens' power, though not its influence. But tonight, in 438 BC, the Parthenon rises perfect and new. Democracy functions with idealistic energy, and human achievement reaches heights that still take our breath away across 25 centuries of admiration and longing. Act 4. Rivalry, War, and Transformation. Section 10. Sparta's Iron Society. Dawn breaks over the Eurotas River Valley in 420 BC, and 7-year-old boys throughout Sparta are being taken from their mothers for the last time. Among them is a child we shall call Alexios, though his true name is lost to history. His mother, unlike mothers elsewhere in Greece, who would weep at such separation, hands him over with stern pride. "Return with your shield or upon it," she says, the traditional Spartan farewell that accepts only victory or death. Follow Alexios as he joins other boys at the Agora, the training system that will forge him into one of the most feared warriors in the ancient world. The boys are divided into packs, their heads shaved, their feet bare, given a single cloak to last the entire year, regardless of season. Listen to the sounds of this first day. Confused, crying quickly suppressed, the bark of instructors who show no sympathy, the shuffle of small bare feet on cold stone, the gnawing hunger that will become their constant companion. The Agora is not merely military training, but complete social conditioning. These boys will learn to read and write, but barely, just enough for practical purposes. They will memorize songs and poems that celebrate Spartan values: courage, obedience, endurance, contempt for luxury. They will dance, for Spartans believe rhythmic movement trains warriors to maintain formation. But above all, they will learn to suffer in silence, to endure pain without complaint, to value the group above themselves. Picture the daily routine that shapes these young bodies and minds. Before dawn, they rise from beds of reeds. They have gathered themselves from the river, breaking them by hand, since knives are forbidden. They exercise naked in all weather, their bodies gradually hardening against cold and heat. They receive barely enough food to survive, deliberately kept hungry to encourage resourcefulness. Stealing food is permitted, even encouraged, but getting caught brings severe beating, not for the theft but for the incompetence of being discovered. The most brutal expression of this system is the diamastagosis, a ritual whipping at the altar of Artemis Orthia. Boys compete to see who can endure the most lashes without crying out. Some die rather than show weakness. Watch as young Alexios takes his place before the altar, his back already crisscrossed with scars from previous ordeals. The whip falls, splitting skin, sending blood running down his legs. His face remains impassive. To flinch would bring shame worse than death. This brutality serves a purpose beyond mere cruelty. Sparta exists in a state of permanent fear, outnumbered perhaps 10-1 by the Helots, the enslaved population of conquered Messenia. Every autumn, the ephors, Sparta's chief magistrates, formally declare war on the Helots, making it legal to kill them without ritual pollution. The Crypteia, a secret police composed of young warriors, stalks the countryside at night, murdering Helots who show leadership potential or simply to spread terror. Picture a Helot family working the fields that feed their Spartan masters. They must produce a fixed amount of grain, oil, and wine each year, keeping barely enough to survive. They dress in animal skins and dog skin caps, markers of their degradation. They are forced to perform demeaning rituals, getting drunk and acting foolishly to demonstrate the superiority of Spartan sobriety. Yet they remember that their ancestors were free, and they wait, generation after generation, for the moment of weakness when they might reclaim their freedom. The Spartan response to this permanent threat is to become a society entirely organized for war. Male citizens are forbidden from practicing trades or farming. Their only profession is warfare. They eat in common messes, syssitia, where 15 men share simple meals of black broth, barley bread, cheese, and figs. Even after marriage, men continue sleeping in barracks until age 30. A Spartan husband visits his wife in darkness, their encounters brief and furtive, some men fathering children with women whose faces they have never seen in daylight. Yet Spartan women enjoy freedoms unknown elsewhere in Greece. They exercise publicly, running and wrestling, to build strong bodies for childbearing. They own property, perhaps controlling 40% of Spartan land by the 4th century BC. They manage households, while men focus on war. They speak their minds with legendary directness. When a foreign woman comments that Spartan women are the only ones who rule their men, Queen Gorgo replies, "Yes, for we are the only ones who give birth to men." Follow a Spartan woman named Lampito through her daily routine. She rises early to manage her estate, inherited from her father since Spartan women, unlike their Athenian counterparts, can inherit property. She exercises in the gymnasium, her body strong and bronzed, shocking visitors from cities where respectable women remain pale and housebound. She supervises Helot workers with harsh efficiency, knowing that any weakness might invite rebellion. In the evening, she gathers with other women to perform religious rituals, for Spartan women dominate certain cults, especially those related to fertility and childbirth. The Spartan political system is as unique as its social structure. Two hereditary kings from different families reign simultaneously, checking each other's power. The Gerousia, a council of 28 elders, plus the two kings, proposes legislation. The Apella, an assembly of all citizens over 30, votes yes or no, but cannot debate. 5 ephors, elected annually, hold real power, able to arrest even kings who transgress law or custom. This constitution, attributed to the legendary lawgiver Lycurgus, creates remarkable stability. While other Greek cities cycle through forms of government, Sparta maintains its system for centuries. The checks and balances prevent any individual from gaining too much power. The conservative bias of the system, with its elderly Gerousia and limited assembly discussion, prevents radical changes that might destabilize society. By age 20, Alexios has survived the Agora and enters the ranks of Spartan warriors. Picture him in full panoply: bronze helmet with horsehair crest, bronze breastplate polished to mirror brightness, scarlet cloak that will not show blood, the aspis shield with lambda for Lacedaemon. He joins an Enemotia, a unit of 36 men who will train, fight, eat, and likely die together. These bonds, forged through shared suffering, create unit cohesion no other Greek army can match. Watch a Spartan phalanx drilling on the field of Ares. While other Greek armies are citizen militias that train occasionally, Spartans are professionals who drill constantly. They execute complex maneuvers, wheeling, advancing, retreating, all in perfect unison to the sound of flutes. Their movements have an almost dance-like quality, precise and beautiful in their deadly efficiency. When they advance into battle, they sing the paean to Apollo, their voices harmonizing as their spears strike in rhythm. The reputation of Spartan warriors extends far beyond their numbers. At Thermopylae, 300 Spartans held off the Persian Empire. When Spartans appear on a battlefield, enemies often retreat rather than face them. Their very presence can determine the outcome of wars. Yet this military excellence comes at tremendous cost. Sparta produces no great art, no philosophy, no literature beyond martial poetry. While Athens builds the Parthenon, Sparta builds only warriors. The Spartan system contains the seeds of its own destruction. The demands of citizenship are so extreme that many fail to meet them. A citizen who cannot contribute to his mess loses political rights. The concentration on military training means Spartans cannot manage economic complexity. The number of full citizens, the homoioi or equals, steadily declines from 8,000 in 500 BC to barely 1,000 2 centuries later. Meanwhile, the Helots wait and watch. In 464 BC, a massive earthquake strikes Sparta, killing thousands. The Helots immediately revolt, nearly overthrowing their masters before being suppressed with great difficulty. This revolt triggers a series of conflicts that will eventually lead to the Great Peloponnesian War, as Athens supports Spartan rebels, while Sparta seeks to destroy Athenian democracy. As evening falls over Sparta, Alexios sits in his mess, sharing black broth with his messmates. The food is deliberately poor, for Lycurgus allegedly said that hunger is the best sauce. They speak little, for Spartans value laconic speech, brief and pointed, when Philip of Macedon will later threaten that if he enters Laconia, he will destroy Sparta. The Spartans will reply with a single word: if. This is a society that has sacrificed everything for military excellence. Art, comfort, family life, individual freedom. It produces warriors of incomparable skill and courage, women of remarkable strength and independence, a political system of exceptional stability, but it produces little else. No Spartan philosopher questions the nature of reality. No Spartan playwright explores the human condition. No Spartan architect designs temples of transcendent beauty. Section 11. The Peloponnesian Cataclysm. The year is 431 BC, and across the Greek world, two incompatible visions of human society prepare for a conflict that will consume a generation and transform civilization. In the Athenian assembly, Pericles urges his fellow citizens to abandon their farms, retreat behind the city's walls, and let the superior Athenian navy win a war of attrition. Meanwhile, in Sparta, King Archidamus leads an army into Attica, expecting the Athenians to march out and fight for their land as honour demands. Follow a farmer named Nicomedes as he makes the agonizing journey from his ancestral farm near the Attic border to the safety of Athens' walls. His family has worked this land for generations beyond memory, their sweat and blood mixed into the soil. Now he must watch from the city walls as Spartan soldiers burn his olive trees, vines carefully tended for decades, destroyed in minutes. Each tree takes 20 years to mature, making this destruction a wound that will last a generation. Listen to the sounds of evacuation, wooden wheels creaking under loads of hastily gathered possessions, children crying in confusion, dogs barking at the disruption of routine, old women keening for homes they will never see again. The narrow streets of Athens, already crowded, become choked with refugees. Families camp in temples, under colonnades, anywhere they can find space. The stench of too many people in too small a space mingles with fear and anger. This war has been building for decades, rooted in the fundamental incompatibility between Athenian democracy and Spartan oligarchy, between maritime empire and land power, between innovation and tradition. Thucydides, who will become this war's great historian, identifies the truest cause: Sparta's fear of growing Athenian power. Athens controls the sea, draws tribute from hundreds of cities, and spreads democratic ideology that threatens traditional aristocracies everywhere. The plague strikes Athens in the war's second year, 430 BC. The disease, perhaps typhus or typhoid fever, finds ideal conditions in the overcrowded city. Thucydides, who survives the illness, describes its progress with clinical precision. Sudden onset of fever, inflammation of eyes and throat, chest pain, violent vomiting, skin breaking out in pustules and ulcers. But worse than physical symptoms is the social breakdown. Picture the sacred precincts of Athens, transformed into charnel houses. Bodies pile up faster than they can be burned. Traditional funeral rites, central to Greek concepts of honour and afterlife, are abandoned. People throw corpses onto other families' funeral pyres. The sick are abandoned by terrified relatives. Law breaks down as people, believing death imminent, pursue immediate pleasures. Some rush into marriage, others into debauchery, all seeking meaning or oblivion in the face of arbitrary death. Pericles himself succumbs to the plague, though not before delivering one final speech defending his strategy. Athens' democracy, deprived of steady leadership, lurches between extremes. Demagogues arise, men like Cleon the Tanner, who promise easy victories through increased violence. The assembly votes for actions that would have horrified the citizens of the Golden Age, executing all male citizens of rebellious Mytilene, only to reverse the decision the next day and send a ship racing to countermand the order. The war develops its own brutal logic. Watch as a Spartan garrison occupies Plataea, Athens' oldest ally. The siege lasts 2 years, the defenders gradually starving. When the city finally falls, all male citizens are executed, women and children enslaved, the city razed. This becomes the pattern. Each atrocity justifies the next. Each side claiming their cruelty is retaliation for enemy barbarism. In 421 BC, both sides, exhausted, agree to the Peace of Nicias, meant to last 50 years. It barely survives 6. The war resumes with the Sicilian expedition, Athens' attempt to conquer Syracuse and dominate the Western Mediterranean. Picture the magnificent fleet departing Piraeus in 415 BC, 134 triremes, 5,000 hoplites, countless support vessels. The entire population of Athens lines the shore, cheering, praying, pouring libations into the sea. Among the commanders is Alcibiades, the war's most compelling and destructive figure. Brilliant, beautiful, charismatic, utterly without fixed loyalty. He embodies the moral confusion war brings. He convinces Athens to launch the expedition, then flees to Sparta when charged with impiety. He advises Sparta how to defeat Athens, seduces a Spartan queen, then flees to Persia. He will later return to Athens, be welcomed as savior, then exiled again. His career demonstrates how war rewards talent, regardless of character. The Sicilian disaster unfolds with the inevitability of tragedy. The Athenians besiege Syracuse but cannot take it. Spartan reinforcements arrive. The Athenians reinforce failure with additional troops. Disease strikes the camp. The commanders quarrel. Finally, attempting to retreat, the entire expedition is destroyed. In the stone quarries of Syracuse, thousands of Athens' best citizens die of exposure, starvation, and despair. Listen to the lamentations in Athens when news arrives. Every family has lost someone. The empire's subjects, sensing weakness, begin revolting. The treasury is empty. Even the sacred reserve, funds set aside for ultimate emergency, must be spent. Desperation leads to desperate measures. The democracy is briefly overthrown by oligarchs promising more efficient prosecution of the war. When democracy is restored, it is harder, more suspicious, less generous than before. The war's final phase brings unexpected reversals. Athens, seemingly defeated, rebuilds its fleet with the last timber from sacred groves. At Arginae, in 406 BC, they win their greatest naval victory. But in the storm-following battle, they cannot rescue sailors from disabled ships. The assembly, in grief-driven rage, executes the victorious generals, including Pericles' son. Socrates, serving his only political office as president of the assembly that day, alone refuses to put the illegal motion to vote. At Agora in 405 BC, the Spartan admiral Lysander destroys the last Athenian fleet through surprise attack. Without ships, Athens cannot import grain. The city starves through winter. In spring 404 BC, Athens surrenders unconditionally. The long walls connecting city to port are demolished to the sound of flute music. The empire is dissolved. Democracy is replaced by the 30 tyrants, Spartan puppets, who execute 1,500 citizens in 8 months of terror. Follow an Athenian citizen named Thrasyllus through these final days. He has fought for democracy for 30 years, seen his sons die in Sicily, his fortune destroyed by war taxes, his political rights stripped by oligarchs. He watches as the walls that protected Athens are demolished, each fallen stone a blow to pride that once claimed Athens would be remembered forever. Yet he also witnesses democracy's restoration within a year, showing remarkable resilience, even in defeat. The Peloponnesian War devastates not just Athens and Sparta, but all Greece. Cities are destroyed, populations enslaved or scattered. Agricultural infrastructure that took generations to build is ruined. Perhaps more damaging is the moral decay. Traditional restraints on warfare, respect for heralds, sanctity of temples, protection of suppliants, all erode. Greeks have shown they can be as brutal to each other as any barbarian enemy. Yet from this devastation comes unexpected cultural flowering. Thucydides writes his history, creating new standards for historical analysis, rejecting divine causation for human motivation. Euripides writes tragedies that question traditional values, showing war's cost in human suffering. Aristophanes produces comedies that satirize war's absurdities, making audiences laugh at their own follies. philosophy begins turning inward, seeking wisdom that transcends political failure. As night falls over Greece in 404 BC, the Great War is over, but no one has truly won. Sparta lacks the administrative capacity to manage an empire. Athens has lost its empire, but retained its cultural magnetism. Persia, funding first one side, then the other, has regained control over Asian Greeks without fighting. Smaller cities, exhausted by choosing sides, seek only peace to rebuild. The war's true victor is perhaps Thucydides' vision of history, that human nature remains constant, that power dynamics recur, that studying the past can illuminate present and future. His analysis of how democracy becomes mob rule, how fear drives policy, how civil conflict destroys social bonds, remains relevant 25 centuries later. The Peloponnesian War becomes the template for understanding how great powers clash, how ideologies conflict, how civilizations can destroy themselves through inability to compromise. Section 12. Philosophy and science flourish. In a grove of trees sacred to the hero Academos, just outside Athens' walls, an extraordinary school opens in 387 BC. Its founder, Plato, has travelled the Mediterranean, seeking wisdom, studied with Pythagoreans in Italy, visited temples in Egypt, nearly been sold into slavery in Syracuse. Now he returns to establish something unprecedented, an institution dedicated purely to the pursuit of knowledge, what we call the Academy. Picture the scene on an ordinary morning at this revolutionary institution. Young men from across the Greek world gather in the shade of plane trees, their discussions mixing with birdsong and the distant sound of Athens rebuilding from war's devastation. At the entrance, an inscription warns, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter here." Mathematics is the foundation, the training in abstract thought necessary for philosophy. Students work through proofs, discovering eternal truths that transcend the chaos of political life. Among the students sits a young man from Stagira in northern Greece. His name is Aristotle, and he will remain here for 20 years, first as student, then as teacher. Watch him now, 17 years old, absorbing everything with an intellect that categorizes, analyzes, systematizes, where his teacher Plato seeks transcendent truth in abstract forms. Aristotle's eyes turn to the particular, the observable, the classifiable diversity of the natural world. Plato teaches through dialogues, philosophical dramas where ideas clash and combine. His protagonist is usually his teacher Socrates, executed by Athens' democracy 20 years earlier. In Plato's hands, Socrates becomes more than historical figure. He becomes philosophy's eternal questioner, exposing ignorance, pursuing definitions, seeking truth through rational discourse rather than traditional authority or mystical revelation. Listen to one of these dialogues unfold. The topic is justice, the question that haunts Greece after decades of war. What makes an action just? Is it helping friends and harming enemies, as traditional ethics suggests? But what if we mistake friend for enemy? Is it giving each their due? But who determines what is due? Through patient questioning, definitions collapse, revealing the complexity beneath seemingly simple concepts. Plato's answer revolutionizes human thought. Justice exists as an eternal form, perfect and unchanging, of which earthly justice is merely imperfect reflection. The philosopher, through reason and contemplation, can glimpse these perfect forms, justice itself, beauty itself, good itself. This world of becoming, where everything changes and decays, is less real than the eternal world of being accessible through thought. This philosophy has practical implications. In the Republic, Plato designs an ideal state ruled by philosopher kings, those who have glimpsed eternal truth and can therefore govern justly. Democracy is criticized as rule by ignorant masses manipulated by demagogues. The state should be structured like the soul, with reason ruling spirit and appetite, creating harmony through hierarchy. The academy attracts brilliant minds who push thought in new directions. Eudoxus develops mathematical astronomy, calculating planetary motions. Theaetetus advances geometry, working on irrational numbers and solid figures. Speusippus and Xenocrates explore the relationship between mathematics and reality. The academy becomes a research institution where knowledge is pursued for its own sake, not for immediate practical application. Meanwhile, in the Lyceum, another gymnasium on Athens' opposite side, Aristotle establishes his own school in 335 BC. His approach differs radically from Plato's. Where Plato looks upward to transcendent forms, Aristotle looks around at the observable world. His students collect constitutions from 158 Greek cities. They gather specimens of plants and animals. They compile observations on everything from weather to rhetoric. Walk with Aristotle and his students through the covered walkways, the peripatoi that give his followers the name peripatetics. Aristotle lectures while walking, his mind categorizing everything it encounters. He distinguishes substances from accidents, actuality from potentiality, form from matter. Every phenomenon has four causes: material, formal, efficient, and final. An oak tree's material cause is its wood, its formal cause its species pattern, its efficient cause the acorn from which it grew, its final cause its tendency toward mature form. This systematic approach transforms every field it touches. In logic, Aristotle develops the syllogism, rules for valid deduction that will dominate Western thought for 2 millennia. In ethics, he proposes the golden mean, virtue as balance between extremes. Courage lies between cowardice and rashness, generosity between stinginess and profligacy. In politics, he analyzes constitutional forms, showing how each contains seeds of its own corruption. In biology, Aristotle's observations are remarkably accurate. He dissects animals, describing internal organs with precision. He recognizes that dolphins and whales are mammals, not fish. He traces embryonic development, noting that the heart forms first. His classification system, dividing animals by blood, habitat, and reproduction, anticipates modern taxonomy. When he errs, it is usually from accepting common beliefs rather than trusting his observations. The medical tradition also flourishes in this period. On the island of Kos, the school of Hippocrates continues developing rational medicine. Disease has natural causes that can be observed, classified, and sometimes treated. The four humours, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, must be kept in balance. Diet, exercise, and environment affect health. The physician must observe carefully, recording symptoms to build empirical knowledge. Picture a physician examining a patient in 4th century Athens. He checks the pulse, examines urine, palpates the abdomen, asks about diet and exercise. He prescribes treatment based on restoring humoral balance, bloodletting for excess blood, purging for excess bile, dietary changes to adjust humoral production. While the theory is wrong, the careful observation and systematic approach establish medicine as empirical discipline rather than magical practice. Mathematics advances dramatically in this period. Eudoxus develops the method of exhaustion, anticipating integral calculus. Menaechmus discovers conic sections. Theaetetus classifies the regular solids. These discoveries seem purely abstract, yet they will prove essential for understanding planetary motion, architectural engineering, and countless practical applications. Greek mathematics establishes the ideal of rigorous proof, each theorem building on proven foundations. In Syracuse, Archimedes bridges pure mathematics and practical engineering. Watch him in his workshop, surrounded by models and mechanisms. He discovers the principle of buoyancy while bathing, allegedly running naked through the streets shouting, "Eureka!" He calculates pi to unprecedented accuracy. He designs war machines that will defend Syracuse against Roman siege for years. His sand reckoner attempts to calculate the number of sand grains needed to fill the universe, pushing mathematical imagination to cosmic scale. Astronomy advances from mythological explanation to mathematical description. Eudoxus proposes geometric models for planetary motion. Heraclides suggests the Earth rotates daily, explaining celestial motion more simply than assuming the entire cosmos revolves around Earth. Aristarchus proposes that Earth orbits the Sun, measuring relative sizes and distances of Sun and Moon with remarkable accuracy. Though heliocentrism will be rejected for theological and common sense reasons, the mathematical methods developed will eventually prove it true. Natural philosophy explores fundamental questions about reality's nature. Democritus proposes that everything consists of atoms, indivisible particles moving through void. Empedocles suggests 4 elements: earth, air, fire, water, combining and separating through forces of love and strife. These theories seem primitive now, but they represent crucial steps toward understanding matter through natural rather than supernatural principles. The Stoics, founded by Zeno of Citium, develop a philosophy suited to the cosmopolitan Hellenistic world. They teach that virtue alone brings happiness, that external circumstances cannot affect the wise person's inner tranquility. The cosmos is rationally ordered, governed by logos, divine reason. Humans should live according to nature, accepting what cannot be changed while acting virtuously within their control. This philosophy will profoundly influence Roman thought and Christian theology. Epicurus establishes his garden, where men and women, slaves and free, study together, scandalizing conservative Athens. He teaches that pleasure is the highest good, but defines pleasure as absence of pain and anxiety. Gods exist but do not interfere in human affairs. Death is nothing to fear, for where we are, death is not, and where death is, we are not. Atomic theory explains everything. Free will exists through random atomic swerving. This materialist philosophy offers comfort without traditional religion. The skeptics, following Pyrrho, question whether certain knowledge is possible. Every argument has a counter-argument. Every perception might be illusion. The wise person suspends judgment, achieving tranquility through accepting uncertainty. This philosophical position, frustrating to those seeking truth, proves valuable for developing critical thinking and intellectual humility. As evening falls over Athens in 300 BC, the schools continue their work. In the academy, students debate whether mathematical objects exist independently of human thought. In the Lyceum, researchers compile observations on animal behavior. In the garden, followers of Epicurus share a simple meal, discussing how to achieve happiness. In the Stoa, Stoics practice mental exercises to maintain emotional equilibrium. This flowering of philosophy and science from war's devastation shows human resilience, the capacity to seek meaning when traditional certainties collapse. The schools of Athens will continue for centuries, surviving political upheavals, training minds that will preserve and transmit Greek thought through Roman, Islamic, and eventually modern European civilization. Their methods, empirical observation, logical analysis, mathematical proof, systematic classification, become foundations for all subsequent intellectual achievement. The questions they ask remain our questions. What is the nature of reality? How should we live? What can we know with certainty? How should society be organized? Their answers may be superseded, but their approach, using human reason to understand the cosmos and our place within it, represents one of humanity's greatest achievements, a light kindled in Athens that still illuminates our search for truth. Act 5. Alexander and the Hellenistic World. Section 13. Macedon's Rise. Picture the court of Macedon in 359 BC, a kingdom that sophisticated Greeks dismiss as barely civilized, where rough warriors drink unmixed wine and practice polygamy, where the ancient customs of blood feud and clan loyalty still hold sway. Yet from this harsh northern land will emerge the force that unites Greece and spreads Hellenic culture to the edges of the known world. In the royal palace at Pella, a young prince named Philip has just returned from 3 years as a hostage in Thebes, his mind transformed by what he has learned. Follow Philip through the palace courtyards, where Macedonian nobles swagger with the confidence of men who have never lost a war to their mountain enemies, yet nurse resentment at being called barbarians by southern Greeks. Philip has observed the sacred band of Thebes, those pairs of lovers who fight as one unit, invincible in their devotion. He has studied the oblique phalanx tactics of the brilliant general Epaminondas. Most importantly, he has learned that Greek military superiority rests not on inherent virtue but on learnable techniques. Listen to the sounds of transformation as Philip, having seized power through cunning and murder, typical of Macedonian succession crises, begins reshaping his kingdom's army. The clash of longer spears, sarissas stretching 18 feet, twice the length of traditional hoplite spears. The measured tread of peasant farmers learning to march in formation, their regional loyalties slowly replaced by devotion to their king and unit. The neigh of cavalry horses, for Macedon's nobles fight mounted, giving them mobility Greeks cannot match. Philip's innovations go beyond mere equipment. He creates the first truly professional army in European history, men who train year-round rather than seasonally. Each soldier receives regular pay, revolutionary, in a world where warriors typically fight for plunder or civic duty. He develops combined arms tactics, coordinating infantry, cavalry, archers, and siege engines in ways Greek city-states never imagined. His army can march faster, fight longer, and adapt to changing circumstances better than any force in the Mediterranean world. Among Philip's companions is a Theban exile named Xenophon, not the famous writer, but a soldier who fled political turmoil in his home city. He watches with amazement as Philip transforms Macedonian society through calculated generosity and strategic marriage. The king takes 7 wives, each alliance bringing new territories or neutralizing potential enemies. He invites Greek intellectuals to his court, making Pella a center of culture. The philosopher Aristotle himself arrives to tutor Philip's son, a boy named Alexander who shows unsettling intensity, even at 13. The young Alexander absorbs everything with frightening speed. Watch him in lessons with Aristotle, questioning the nature of the cosmos, memorizing passages from Homer's Iliad, which he treats as a manual for heroic behavior. He sleeps with a copy of the epic under his pillow, beside a dagger his father gave him. The boy already shows signs of the contradictions that will define him, capable of profound tenderness and explosive violence, philosophical depth and primitive superstition, strategic genius and emotional impulsiveness. Philip's conquest of Greece proceeds through diplomacy, backed by force. He intervenes in the sacred war, posing as defender of Apollo's oracle at Delphi. He exploits conflicts between Greek cities, supporting weaker against stronger, preventing any coalition from forming against him. When cities resist, he demonstrates his army's superiority, but he prefers gold to iron. An arse loaded with gold can take any city, he allegedly claims, though this cynicism masks sophisticated understanding of human motivation. The decisive confrontation comes at Chaeronea in 338 BC. Picture the battlefield, the combined forces of Athens and Thebes, the 2 greatest cities of Greece, facing the Macedonian phalanx across a plain in Boeotia. On one wing, the sacred band of Thebes takes its position, 300 warriors bound by love and honor, undefeated for 40 years. On the other, Athenian hoplites stand ready, defending their democracy against foreign domination. The morning sun glints off thousands of bronze helmets and spear points. The battle unfolds with tactical brilliance. Philip commands the right wing, deliberately retreating to draw the Athenians forward, creating a gap in the Greek line. Through this gap charges the Macedonian cavalry, led by 18-year-old Alexander in his first major battle. He aims directly for the sacred band, and in savage fighting, the boy prince destroys these legendary warriors to the last man. The Greek alliance collapses. Philip has won not just a battle but supremacy over Greece. Yet Philip shows unexpected restraint in victory. He returns Athenian prisoners without ransom, sends his son Alexander to escort the ashes of Athenian dead home with honor. He establishes the League of Corinth, uniting Greek cities under Macedonian leadership, but allowing internal autonomy. He presents himself not as conqueror, but as leader of a pan-Hellenic crusade against Persia, revenge for Xerxes' invasion a century and a half earlier. In 336 BC, Philip celebrates his daughter's wedding with magnificent ceremonies at the old capital of Agora. Picture the scene: representatives from across Greece attending, theatrical performances, athletic competitions, a parade of golden statues of the 12 Olympian gods, plus a 13th representing Philip himself. As the king enters the theatre, walking alone to show his confidence in his subjects' loyalty, a bodyguard named Pausanias steps forward and drives a blade between his ribs. Philip dies within moments, his grand plans unfulfilled. The assassination's motives remain mysterious, possibly personal vengeance, possibly political conspiracy. Some suspect Alexander's mother, Olympias, clearing the path for her son. Others blame Persian gold, seeking to prevent invasion. The truth dies with Pausanias, speared by pursuing guards before he can be questioned. Macedonia, so dependent on Philip's genius, seems likely to fragment as subject peoples revolt and rivals challenge the boy king. But Alexander, now 20, shows immediate decisiveness that shocks observers. He secures the army's loyalty, executes potential rivals, marches south to reimpose Macedonian authority. When Thebes revolts, believing false rumors of Alexander's death, he appears before their walls with stunning speed. The city's destruction is methodical and terrible. 6,000 killed, 30,000 enslaved, every building razed except temples and the house of the poet Pindar, whom Alexander admires. This calculated atrocity achieves its purpose. Greek resistance collapses. The young king is elected leader of the League of Corinth, inheriting his father's position and plans. Yet where Philip was patient and pragmatic, Alexander burns with mystical ambition. He believes himself descended from Achilles through his mother, from Heracles through his father. He seeks not just victory, but immortality through glory. As Alexander prepares his army for the Persian expedition, Greece watches with mixed emotions. Many resent Macedonian domination, but recognize that resistance means destruction. Some genuinely support the crusade against Persia. Others hope both empires will exhaust themselves in conflict. The philosopher Diogenes, asked what Alexander could do for him, requests only that the king stop blocking his sunlight, a response that delights Alexander with its fearlessness. Section 14. Alexander's lightning conquest. In spring of 334 BC, Alexander crosses the Hellespont with 35,000 soldiers, the beginning of an odyssey that will transform the known world. As his ship approaches the Asian shore, the young king hurls his spear into the sand, claiming the continent as spear-won territory. He then visits Troy, running naked around Achilles' tomb, taking armor allegedly from the heroic age, performing rituals that blur the line between historical campaign and mythological reenactment. Follow into this army a young Persian noble named Zeus, who has come to assess this threat to his empire. He observes the Macedonian camp with professional interest, the disciplined layout, the mixing of nationalities as Greeks, Macedonians, Thracians, and Illyrians serve together, the careful attention to supply lines and intelligence gathering. This is not the disorganized barbarian horde Persian propaganda describes, but a sophisticated military machine. The first major battle at the Granicus River nearly ends the expedition before it properly begins. Alexander leads a cavalry charge across the river directly into Persian lines, his white-plumed helmet making him an obvious target. A Persian noble's axe splits his helmet, and only the intervention of Clytus the Black, who cuts off the attacker's arm, saves Alexander's life. The victory is complete but sobering. Alexander has risked everything on personal courage, a pattern that will continue throughout his campaigns. The conquest proceeds with bewildering speed. Rather than pursuing the defeated Persian army inland, Alexander turns south along the coast, systematically capturing naval bases to neutralize Persian sea power. Cities that submit receive generous treatment. Those that resist face siege warfare, perfected by Philip and enhanced by Alexander. At Miletus and Halicarnassus, massive siege towers and catapults reduce walls that had stood for centuries. Listen to the sounds of a Macedonian siege, the rhythmic pounding of battering rams against gates, the crash of stones from catapults shattering walls, the whistle of arrows from towers providing covering fire, the shouts of engineers directing the filling of moats with rubble, the groans of torsion springs launching projectiles. This is warfare transformed into engineering, victory through systematic application of force rather than heroic combat. The Gordian knot presents Alexander with an opportunity for propaganda genius. This ancient tangle of rope, binding a wagon to a post, carries a prophecy that whoever unties it will rule Asia. Alexander examines the knot, then either cuts it with his sword or pulls out the pin holding it together, depending on which source we believe. Either way, he demonstrates that he will not be bound by conventional thinking, that he will create his own destiny through decisive action. At Issus in 333 BC, Alexander faces the Persian great king Darius III for the first time. Picture the narrow coastal plain between mountains and sea, negating Persian numerical superiority. Darius has positioned his army perfectly, but Alexander's tactical genius and personal leadership prove decisive. Leading the companion cavalry, Alexander charges directly at Darius, coming so close that the great king flees in his chariot, abandoning his mother, wife, and daughters, who become Alexander's honoured captives. The siege of Tyre in 332 BC demonstrates Alexander's determination to let no obstacle stand. This island city, considered impregnable, has resisted conquerors for centuries. Alexander built a causeway from the mainland, half a mile across open water, under constant attack from Tyrian ships and catapults. It takes 7 months, but when the walls are finally breached, Alexander's rage at the delay results in massacre. 8,000 Tyrians die, 30,000 are enslaved. The message is clear. Resistance is futile and costly. Egypt welcomes Alexander as liberator from Persian rule. At Memphis, he is crowned pharaoh according to ancient ritual, but it is his journey to the oracle of Amun at Siwa that transforms him. After crossing the desert, guided allegedly by birds when his party becomes lost, he enters the shrine alone. What the oracle tells him remains secret, but he emerges convinced of his divine parentage. From this point, he begins requiring prostration from subjects, adopting Persian court ceremonial that disgusts his Macedonian companions. The climactic battle at Gaugamela in 331 BC sees Alexander at his tactical peak. Darius has chosen the battlefield carefully, levelling the ground for his scythed chariots and cavalry. His army numbers perhaps 200,000 against Alexander's 47,000. The Persian line extends far beyond both Macedonian flanks. Defeat seems certain. Watch Alexander's response. He angles his advance, forcing the Persians to shift position, creating gaps in their line. When an opening appears, he leads the companion cavalry through it, again driving directly at Darius. The great king flees once more, and though his army fights on bravely, his departure triggers collapse. The Persian Empire, which has dominated the Near East for 2 centuries, effectively ends in a single afternoon. The pursuit of Darius becomes an odyssey through the heart of the ancient Persian Empire. Babylon surrenders, its priests welcoming Alexander as the legitimate successor. Susa yields its vast treasuries, gold and silver accumulated over centuries. Persepolis, the ceremonial capital, falls after token resistance. Here, Alexander makes his most controversial decision, burning the palaces, either in drunken revelry or calculated policy, to signal the end of Persian power. Picture the flames consuming Persepolis through the eyes of Zeus, now serving Alexander, but watching his civilization's monuments turn to ash. The beautiful reliefs, showing tribute bearers from every nation, the 100-columned hall where Persian kings received homage, the archives containing centuries of records, all reduced to rubble and char. Some Macedonians also weep, recognizing that Alexander is destroying what he supposedly came to liberate. Darius flees eastward, pursued relentlessly by Alexander across desert and mountain. The chase ends when Persian nobles, led by Bessus, murder their king rather than let him be captured. Alexander finds Darius dying in a wagon, abandoned by all except a single loyal slave. According to legend, Darius asks Alexander to avenge his murder and protect his family. Whether true or propaganda, Alexander uses this to present himself as Darius's legitimate successor, pursuing Bessus as regicide. The conquest continues eastward into regions no Greek has seen: Bactria, Afghanistan, the Hindu Kush, lands of fierce mountain tribes who fight guerrilla warfare, unlike anything the Macedonians have faced. Alexander adapts, dividing his forces, using local allies, showing ruthlessness that shocks even hardened veterans. Entire populations are massacred or transplanted. Cities named Alexandria are founded every few hundred miles, populated by retired veterans and local women, creating pockets of Hellenism across Asia. In India, Alexander faces war elephants for the first time at the Hydaspes River in 326 BC. King Porus deploys 200 elephants, mobile fortresses that terrify horses and men alike. Alexander responds with tactical innovation, using light troops to wound the elephants, causing them to rampage through their own lines. The victory is complete, but the cost is severe, including the death of Bucephalus, Alexander's beloved horse, companion since childhood. At the Hyphasis River, the army finally refuses to go farther. Listen to the monsoon rains, drumming on tent leather, as Alexander pleads with his men to continue to the endless ocean he believes lies just ahead. But after 8 years and 11,000 miles, fighting through desert and mountain, facing enemies from Greek hoplites to Indian elephants, they have reached their limit. Alexander sulks in his tent for 3 days, then reluctantly agrees to turn back. The return journey becomes a death march through the Gedrosian desert. Alexander, perhaps punishing his army for forcing retreat, chooses the most difficult route. Sandstorms bury entire units. Water runs out. Men drink blood from pack animals, chew roots for moisture. When scouts find water and bring it to Alexander, in a helmet, he pours it into the sand rather than drink, while his men thirst, a gesture of solidarity that moves veterans to tears. Section 15. Hellenistic Synthesis. Alexander dies in Babylon in 323 BC, barely 33 years old, his empire stretching from the Adriatic to the Indus. The fever that kills him, whether poison, disease, or the accumulated effect of wounds and drinking, takes 10 days to complete its work. Picture his generals gathering around his deathbed, asking to whom he leaves his empire. To the strongest, he whispers, or perhaps to Craterus, his most trusted general. The ambiguity triggers immediate conflict. The empire fragments before Alexander's body is cold. His generals, the Diadochi or successors, carve up territories like wolves, dividing a kill. Ptolemy takes Egypt, establishing a dynasty that will last 3 centuries. Seleucus claims the Asian territories from Syria to India. Antigonus holds Anatolia and Syria. Cassander controls Macedonia and Greece. Lysimachus takes Thrace. Each proclaims loyalty to Alexander's memory while building independent kingdoms. Follow a scholar named Demetrius of Phalerum as he arrives in Alexandria, Egypt's new capital, in 295 BC. The city, planned by Alexander, but built by Ptolemy, represents the Hellenistic ideal, Greek rational planning imposed on Egyptian landscape. Streets intersect at right angles. The harbour, protected by the island of Pharos, accommodates hundreds of ships. The royal quarter contains palaces, gardens, and the Mausion, shrine of the Muses, what we call the museum. The Great Library of Alexandria embodies the Hellenistic mission to collect and organize all human knowledge. Ptolemy sends agents across the known world to acquire texts. Ships entering Alexandria must surrender all books for copying. The originals are kept, copies returned. Within decades, the library holds perhaps 400,000 scrolls, the accumulated wisdom of centuries. Scholars arrive from everywhere, creating an international community devoted to learning. Listen to the sounds of intellectual revolution. Styluses scratching on papyrus as scribes copy texts. Heated arguments in multiple languages as scholars debate interpretation. The rustle of scrolls being unrolled in the reading rooms. Lectures on mathematics, echoing through colonnaded halls. Here, Euclid systematizes geometry, creating the textbook that will educate students for 2 millennia. Here, Eratosthenes calculates Earth's circumference with remarkable accuracy. Here, Aristarchus proposes that Earth orbits the Sun, 16 centuries before Copernicus. The Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders, stands 400 feet tall on Pharos Island. Its fire, reflected by polished bronze mirrors, guides ships from 30 miles at sea. But it serves as more than navigation aid. It symbolizes the Hellenistic mission to illuminate the world with Greek knowledge. From Alexandria, Greek language, education, and culture spread up the Nile, transforming ancient Egyptian society. In Antioch, capital of the Seleucid Empire, different cultural streams merge. Picture the city's famous street, 2 miles long, lined with colonnades, where Greek philosophers debate. Jewish rabbis teach Torah in Greek translation. Persian magi tend sacred fires, and Arab merchants haggle over silk from China. This cosmopolitan mixing creates new religious and philosophical syntheses. Mystery cults blend Greek, Egyptian, and Asian elements. Astrology, combining Babylonian observations with Greek geometry, claims to read human fate in stellar positions. The Seleucid Empire faces unique challenges, ruling vast, diverse territories. Greek cities are founded throughout the empire, islands of Hellenism in seas of indigenous culture. Local aristocracies are encouraged to adopt Greek education, dress, and customs. Gymnasiums are built where young elites exercise naked in Greek fashion, shocking local sensibilities, but marking participants as civilized. Yet beneath this Hellenistic veneer, ancient cultures persist, adapting rather than disappearing. In the kingdom of Pergamon, the Attalid dynasty creates a center of learning, rivaling Alexandria. Their library, containing 200,000 scrolls, pioneers the use of parchment when Ptolemaic jealousy blocks papyrus exports. The city's altar to Zeus, decorated with friezes, showing gods battling giants, represents Hellenistic art at its most dramatic, emotional, dynamic, technically virtuosic. The defeated giants writhe in agony, their faces contorted with pain and despair, far removed from the serene idealism of classical Greek sculpture. Science flourishes in this competitive environment. Rulers patronize scholars for prestige. In Syracuse, Archimedes discovers principles of hydraulics and mechanics. In Alexandria, physicians dissect human corpses, mapping anatomy with unprecedented precision. In Rhodes, Hipparchus creates the first star catalogue and discovers precession of equinoxes. Greek becomes the language of science, its technical vocabulary spreading across cultures, yet Hellenistic kingdoms contain fatal contradictions. Watch a gymnasium in Babylon, where young Greeks exercise, while local Babylonians, heirs to 3,000 years of civilization, are excluded as barbarians. The kingdoms depend on Greek and Macedonian soldiers who maintain separate identity through exclusive institutions. Military colonies are islands of privilege in seas of subject populations who contribute taxes and labour, but never fully belong. The eventual Roman conquest is already visible in 323 BC, when Roman ambassadors arrive at Babylon just before Alexander's death. These representatives of an obscure Italian republic seem insignificant beside the splendour of Hellenistic courts. Yet Rome possesses what Hellenistic kingdoms lack: a system for incorporating conquered peoples, transforming enemies into citizens. Where Hellenistic kingdoms remain, Greek dominions over foreign subjects, Rome creates universal empire. Picture Cleopatra VII, last of the Ptolemies. In 30 BC, she speaks 9 languages, corresponds with scholars, maintains the library, rules Egypt with intelligence and determination, yet she represents a dying world. Her romantic alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony are desperate attempts to preserve independence through personal relationships. When Octavian's forces close in, she chooses the asp's bite rather than parade in Roman triumph. The last Hellenistic kingdom falls, but Hellenistic culture conquers its conquerors. Roman elites learn Greek, send their sons to Athens for education, copy Greek art and architecture. Greek remains the Eastern Mediterranean's common language. The New Testament is written in Greek, not Hebrew or Aramaic. When Constantine founds his new capital, Constantinople is consciously Hellenistic, a new Alexandria rather than new Rome. The Hellenistic synthesis transforms human consciousness. Before Alexander, people identified with tribes, cities, or kingdoms. After they can imagine themselves as citizens of the world, cosmopolites. Philosophy adapts to this expanded horizon. Stoics teach universal brotherhood. Epicureans seek happiness through friendship, transcending nationality. Cynics reject all social conventions as arbitrary constructs. These ideas prepare ground for universal religions, Christianity, and Islam that will reshape the world. As the sun sets over Alexandria in 30 BC, the last day of Hellenistic independence, the library still operates, scholars still debate, ships still navigate by the lighthouse's beam. Tomorrow, Roman administrators will arrive, efficient and practical, but they will govern through Greek-speaking bureaucrats, issue coins with Greek inscriptions, worship gods with Greek names. The political experiment of Hellenistic monarchy has failed, but the cultural experiment of spreading Greek thought has succeeded beyond Alexander's wildest dreams. Listen to the evening sounds of this transformed world. Greek spoken in marketplaces from Spain to India, Homer recited in theatres from Britain to Sudan, Euclidean geometry taught from Ireland to China. Alexander sought to conquer the world with spears. He succeeded in conquering it with ideas. The boy who slept with the Iliad under his pillow has made the entire world students of Greek thought, a conquest more lasting than any military victory. This Hellenistic moment when Greek culture engaged with ancient wisdom of Egypt, Mesopotamia, Persia, and India, creates syntheses that still shape our world. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, all bear marks of this cultural mixing. The very idea that knowledge should be systematically collected, organized, and transmitted comes from institutions like the Great Library. The concept that reason can unlock nature's secrets, fundamental to science, emerges from this marriage of Greek logic with Eastern observation. As our journey through the Hellenistic world concludes, picture one final scene. A Jewish family in Alexandria celebrating Passover in 200 BC. They read their scriptures in Greek translation, the Septuagint, created in the library. Their children attend gymnasium, studying Homer alongside Torah. They are simultaneously Jewish and Hellenistic, maintaining ancient traditions while embracing cosmopolitan culture. This synthesis, repeated across countless communities and cultures, creates the interconnected world we inherit, where ideas flow across boundaries, where local and universal combine in endless creative tension. Conclusion: the eternal gift. Section 16. Rome's conquest, Greece's victory. The year is 146 BC, and the Roman general Lucius Mummius stands in the ruins of Corinth, watching his soldiers load Greek treasures onto ships bound for Rome. The city burns behind him, its citizens enslaved or scattered, payment for Greek resistance to Roman expansion. Yet even as Mummius oversees this destruction, he carefully preserves certain statues and paintings, shipping them intact to adorn Roman temples and villas. The conqueror, even in his moment of triumph, recognizes himself as culturally inferior to the conquered. Picture a Greek tutor named Andronicus, arriving at a Roman villa that same year, purchased to educate the children of Senator Marcus Crassus. Andronicus is a slave in legal terms, property that can be bought and sold, yet he carries within his mind treasures more valuable than gold: fluency in Homer's verses, understanding of Euclidean geometry, knowledge of Aristotelian logic. His young Roman charges initially resent learning Greek, seeing it as submission to a conquered people, but gradually they discover that Greek is the language of everything sophisticated, everything worth knowing. Listen to the sounds of cultural transformation echoing through Roman households. Greek verses memorized by Roman children, Greek philosophy debated in Roman courts, Greek plays performed in Roman theatres. The Roman poet Horace will later write, "Captive Greece took captive her savage conqueror, and nowhere is this more visible than in education." To be truly educated in Rome means to be educated in Greek culture. Roman nobles compete to acquire Greek libraries, hire Greek tutors, sponsor Greek artists. The process had begun long before political conquest. As early as the 3rd century BC, Romans were adapting Greek gods to their own pantheon. Zeus becomes Jupiter, Athena becomes Minerva, Aphrodite becomes Venus. But these are not simple translations. The Romans reshape Greek divinities to reflect Roman values, emphasizing duty, gravity, and state service over the more playful, passionate Greek originals. Yet the very need to clothe Roman religion in Greek forms reveals cultural dependency. Follow Andronicus as he teaches his charges the foundations of rhetoric, that Greek art of persuasive speaking, essential for Roman political life. Every technique they learn, every example they study, comes from Greek sources. Demosthenes' speeches against Philip become models for Roman oratory. Aristotle's rhetoric provides the theoretical framework. Even Cicero, Rome's greatest orator, acknowledges his debt to Greek teachers, though he adapts their techniques to Roman law courts and Senate debates. In philosophy, the Roman embrace of Greek thought is even more complete. Picture a Roman noble's garden where friends gather for philosophical discussion. They debate Stoic ethics, how virtue alone suffices for happiness, how wise men remain unmoved by fortune's changes. These Greek ideas, filtered through Roman practical sensibility, create a philosophy suited to imperial administration. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, will write his Meditations in Greek, finding in Stoicism the strength to bear absolute power's burdens. The mathematical and scientific knowledge of Greece becomes essential for Roman engineering. Roman architects study Greek treatises on proportion and harmony. The dome of the Pantheon, Rome's architectural masterpiece, depends on geometric principles developed in Alexandria. Roman military engineers use Archimedean mechanics for siege weapons. Roman doctors follow Hippocratic methods. Without Greek theoretical knowledge, Roman practical genius could not build aqueducts, plan cities, or maintain public health in a vast empire. Yet Romans maintain ambivalence toward Greek culture, even as they absorb it. They admire Greek art while despising contemporary Greeks as weak and corrupt. They study Greek philosophy while considering excessive intellectualism effeminate. They adopt Greek architectural forms while claiming Roman engineering superiority. This tension between admiration and contempt, between cultural dependence and political dominance, characterizes the entire Greco-Roman relationship. Watch as Roman conquest actually spreads Greek culture more widely than Alexander's armies ever could. Roman roads carry Greek ideas to Britain, Germany, and Spain. Roman administration operates through Greek-speaking bureaucrats in the Eastern Empire. Roman law incorporates Greek philosophical concepts of natural law and universal justice. The Pax Romana, Roman peace, creates conditions for Greek culture to flourish across 3 continents. Christianity emerges from this Greco-Roman synthesis. The New Testament is written in Greek, not Aramaic or Hebrew. Paul of Tarsus, spreading the new faith, debates Stoic and Epicurean philosophers in Athens, using Greek rhetorical techniques to argue for resurrection. Early Christian theology employs Greek philosophical vocabulary: logos, the word; pneuma, the spirit; ecclesia, the church. The religion that will reshape the Western world is unthinkable without Greek conceptual frameworks. Picture a church council in Nicaea in 325 AD, where bishops debate Christ's nature, using Greek philosophical distinctions between essence and substance. The creed they produce, still recited in churches today, represents Hebrew religious insight expressed through Greek intellectual categories, enforced by Roman imperial power. This synthesis creates medieval Christendom, preserving classical learning through civilization's darkest hours. When Rome falls in the West, Greek learning retreats to Constantinople, New Rome, where it continues for another 1,000 years. Byzantine scholars preserve texts that would otherwise be lost. They copy and recopying manuscripts of Plato, Aristotle, Euclid, Ptolemy. When Constantinople finally falls to Ottoman Turks in 1453 AD, Greek scholars flee west, bringing manuscripts that help spark the Renaissance, the rebirth of classical learning. Section 17. The Living Legacy. Now, as our long journey through ancient Greece approaches its gentle close, let your mind drift forward through time, observing how Greek gifts continue shaping the world you inhabit. Picture a modern parliament building, its classical columns and pediment consciously echoing the Parthenon, architectural language declaring democracy's ancient roots. Inside, representatives debate using procedures descended from the Athenian assembly, though serving millions rather than thousands. The very words spoken in these chambers carry Greek etymology. Democracy itself, demos and kratos, people and power; politics from polis, the city-state; economy from oikos and nomos; household management expanded to nations; philosophy, theology, psychology, technology, all compound Greek roots, to name fields of knowledge Greeks invented or transformed. Open any scientific journal and find Greek letters representing mathematical variables, Greek prefixes naming chemical compounds, Greek suffixes classifying biological species. Listen to a medical consultation in any modern hospital. The doctor speaks of diagnosis and prognosis, therapy and syndrome, using Hippocratic vocabulary refined but not replaced. The physical examination follows patterns established on Kos, 24 centuries ago. Observation, palpation, questioning about symptoms and history. The Hippocratic Oath, modified for modern ethics, still guides medical practice. First, do no harm remains medicine's fundamental principle. In universities worldwide, students still begin geometry with Euclid's axioms, learn physics through Archimedean principles, study drama through Aristotle's Poetics. The scientific method itself, hypothesis tested through observation, analyzed through logic, expressed in mathematical relationships, represents Greek innovation, refined but not fundamentally altered. When scientists speak of atoms, they use Democritus's word. When they calculate planetary orbits, they use conic sections discovered by Menaechmus. Picture an athlete preparing for Olympic competition, the 5 rings symbolizing continental unity through athletic excellence. The modern Olympics, revived in 1896, consciously invoke ancient Greek ideals, competition as path to excellence, sports transcending political division, the beauty of human physical achievement. The marathon distance commemorates Phidippides' legendary run. The Olympic flame, carried from Olympia, links contemporary athletes to ancient predecessors. Modern theatre still follows templates established in Athens. Every sitcom using mistaken identity echoes Menander's plots. Every tragedy exploring fate versus free will follows paths Sophocles mapped. The 3-act structure, character development through conflict, dramatic irony where audiences know what characters don't, all derive from Greek innovation. Even cinema, that most modern medium, uses techniques Greek dramatists developed. The chorus becomes voice-over narration, the mask becomes close-up, the messenger speech becomes flashback. Philosophy departments in every university teach courses that begin with Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, not from mere historical interest, but because questions they raised remain vital. What is justice? How should we live? What can we know with certainty? What is the best form of government? Their methods, dialectic questioning, logical analysis, systematic categorization, remain fundamental tools of thought, every philosophical position defined in reaction to or development of Greek ideas. Watch a jury deliberating in any common law courtroom. 12 citizens, chosen randomly, hearing evidence, determining guilt or innocence, their verdict final. This system descends directly from Athenian popular courts. The assumption that ordinary people possess wisdom to judge complex matters, that collective decision-making produces justice better than expert judgment. The adversarial system, prosecution, and defense presenting opposing arguments for jury evaluation mirrors Greek legal practice. Modern psychology still grapples with concepts Greeks articulated. The psyche itself is their word for soul or mind. Psychological therapy, talking through problems to achieve self-knowledge and healing, follows Socratic precedent. The idea of catharsis, emotional release through art or expression, comes from Aristotle's analysis of tragedy. Even the couch of psychoanalysis echoes the Greek symposium, reclining while exploring the mind's depths. The aesthetic principles Greeks established still shape visual culture. The golden ratio appears in credit card dimensions, website layouts, architectural facades. The classical orders, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, provide vocabulary for architectural description. Museums worldwide display Greek statues or Roman copies, their idealized human forms still defining beauty. Fashion photographers pose models in contrapposto. The weight shift Greek sculptors perfected. Graphic designers use Greek key patterns that geometric meander as fresh as when it decorated geometric pottery. Listen to political discourse in any democracy. Citizens argue about the balance between freedom and order, individual rights and collective good, majority rule and minority protection, all tensions Greek democracy first articulated. Demagogues still arise, promising simple solutions to complex problems, appealing to emotion over reason. The word itself is Greek, demos and agogos, leader of the people, warning encoded in etymology. Every generation must relearn lessons Athens taught through triumph and catastrophe. Educational philosophy still reflects Greek innovation. Liberal arts education, developing whole persons rather than narrow specialists, follows Greek paideia, cultivation of body, mind, and character. The Socratic method, learning through questions rather than lectures, remains pedagogical gold standard. The idea that education should produce citizens capable of self-governance, not merely skilled workers, descends from Greek democratic theory. Even the campus, with its libraries, gymnasiums, and theatres, recreates the academy's integration of intellectual, physical, and cultural development. Look at the night sky and see it through Greek eyes. The constellations bear names from Greek mythology: Orion the hunter, Andromeda the chained princess, Perseus the hero. The planets are Greek wanderers, planetes. The galaxy is their Milky Way, galaxias from Gala, milk. When astronomers discover new phenomena, they reach for Greek words: asteroid, star-like, comet, long-haired, parallel, beside one another. The cosmos itself is their word for ordered universe, opposite of chaos. In mathematics, every student learning algebra encounters Greek letters: alpha, beta, gamma marking angles, pi relating circumference to diameter, sigma summing series. The very word mathematics comes from mathema, that which is learned. Geometric terms: parallel, perpendicular, hypotenuse, diameter, all Greek descriptions that have become universal language. The proof that logical demonstration from axioms to conclusion represents Greek revolution in thought, replacing authority with reason. Modern ethics still wrestle with frameworks Greeks established. Utilitarian calculation of greatest good for greatest number develops from Epicurean pleasure principles. Duty-based ethics grows from Stoic emphasis on virtue, regardless of consequences. Virtue ethics, focusing on character rather than acts, follows Aristotelian tradition. Every ethical position can trace genealogy to Greek philosophical schools, their arguments refined but not replaced. Yet perhaps Greece's greatest gift is not any specific innovation, but the spirit of inquiry itself, the assumption that humans through reason can understand their world, improve their condition, create beauty that transcends mortality. The Greek word for this love of wisdom is philosophy, but it encompasses more: the restless curiosity that drives science, the pursuit of excellence that motivates athletics, the desire for justice that underlies law, the search for beauty that inspires art. As you drift now towards sleep, carried gently by the rhythms of ancient stories, know that you participate in continuity, stretching across millennia. The words you speak, the thoughts you think, the communities you inhabit, all bear imprints of Greek innovation. Democracy, with all its flaws and glories, the life of the mind as worthy pursuit, the dignity of human reason, the possibility of progress through education and effort. These are gifts from a small, quarrelsome people on the edge of the Mediterranean, who somehow glimpsed universal truths. Picture one last time that rocky landscape where our journey began. The wine-dark sea, dotted with islands, the clear light that seems to reveal truth itself, the harsh beauty that demanded human excellence to survive and transcend. From this unlikely ground grew ideas that would spread like seeds on history's wind, taking root in countless soils, flowering into forms the Greeks could never have imagined yet would certainly recognize. The oracle at Delphi commanded, "Know thyself." This simple imperative, carved in stone 25 centuries ago, remains humanity's most difficult and necessary task. The Greeks began this exploration, mapping the territory of human possibility, showing both our potential for greatness and capacity for destruction, our reason and passion, our individual dignity and social nature. They gave us not answers but better questions, not solutions but methods for seeking them. Thank you for exploring these quiet pathways of the past with me. Sleep peacefully, wandering through history's quiet gardens.